welcome to another board meeting. We've had one a week ago Monday, have one today, and also, and probably by another couple of weeks, we have another one scheduled. We have a lot of things to go over. We've made lots of progress on many things. Tonight, the only thing I want to talk about to get it started, before we start the actual meeting, I want the community to know that we received the executed copy of the Taylor Morrison settlement agreement. So we are all bound by that agreement, and we should be getting our check within the next 5 business days. So that's a great accomplishment for the entire team and the entire community. And with that, I will turn it over to Tessa.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Well, with that said, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 6:01. Proof of notice was posted on property, both at the Culinary Center and at the golf shop, in accordance with Florida statute, as well as being emailed to the community. We do have a quorum of directors here with everybody present, so thank you for joining us. Our first item of business this evening is the approval of prior meeting minutes. We have 2 sets of draft minutes to approve this evening, one from June 29th and one from last week's meeting of August 20th. I don't know if the board's had an opportunity to review both sets of those, or if you're in a position to make a motion to approve those this evening.
I'm looking for a motion to approve both.
I move that we accept the minutes of the meetings of August 20th and June 29th of this year as written.
Have a second? Any discussion? If no discussion, let's vote. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
All right, wonderful. Our next item of business this evening is the treasurer's financial report. I'll turn that over to Krish.
Thanks a lot, Tasha. For those of you, I'm just going to still talk with my mask on. If you can't hear me on the thing, please send a text message, either to Tessa or somebody is watching, please, and then I'll remove my mask, please, if that's what happens. I want to take some time today to cover a lot of the financial areas, some at a high level, some in detail. Depends on the kind of questions I've been receiving. So today I'm going to cover really the first 7 months of income and expense at a high level. I'll follow that, including what is the impact on the 2020 assessments based on 7 months. So I'll show that to you too at the same time. Then I'll cover the 2021 budget process that we're undergoing so that you all are aware of what's happening in the 2021 budget. And finally, I'm going to introduce to you all a concept called financial robustness. What do we need to have to be robust as an association in our finances? It is just an introduction of the concept.
Yeah, the feed is going on the live stream.
Okay.
That is working on it. Live stream.
How far did we get? No, we're able to get the opening, and then it
You
can...
got it
Got
delayed.
you and Tess and Chris started, and then it went out.
We just have S one on.
I just got a text from Tina at home, and she said she's not able to hear it.
I didn't see Chris sit down for just drink a coffee.
Yep.
It just locked the S one on, right?
Okay. Some people maybe get.
Should we continue then? Evan, what do you think?
I mean, it'll go in and out, I'm recording the whole time, so if you upload it at the end or whatever.
All right, let's go back to Chris then.
And somebody else said they just closed the stream and reopened it, and now it's working.
Now it's working?
Yeah, close, reopen, and we're back.
Okay. Can we start?
I think you're good.
Okay. Good evening. As I said, I'm going to cover at a high level some financials today for the first 7 months. Along with that, I'll share with you what the current view is really for the 2020 assessments. I know all of you are probably interested in that. Then I'll also cover a little bit about the 2021 budget process that has been started, where we are, and what are some critical items that are going to happen. And finally, I'm going to introduce a concept that's termed as financial robustness. How can we be robust with our finances as an association? So I'm going to start dialogue on that concept. So let's just move into what is happening in terms of Sorry about that. Somehow the clicker seems to not work. Okay. The slide I'm showing you right now is the first 7 months of income, the total income and total expenses by month. As you see on the slide, the green line is the income and the red line is the expenses. Simple thing, for those of you that you feel I don't know the finances well, all you need to know is the green line needs to be higher or just touching the red line. That's it. If the green line comes below the red line, that means we're not having sufficient revenue to cover our expenses. So the good news for the year till now is every month we have been slightly higher in a couple of months. This is the month. July is the month where it came closest. It's only about $1,700 on the positive side. But overall, as you can see, we have done pretty well. And a lot of credit goes to really the property management companies in trying to manage the cost. You can see the red line actually, where the expenses have significantly come down through the whole year, all the way up to May. That's when we had the major shutdowns in March, April. We kind of did the unfortunate thing that we had to do, is furlough some people. And all has contributed to control the costs, and you can see the costs have come down quite significantly in this time frame. And that's helped us in terms of how the financial performance has been. Take a look, the costs are coming up. Not that drastic. May is not that low because the last property management company did not kind of cover a lot of the costs in the last month they were here. So they ended up in June, and some of the June costs ended up in July. So if you correct those, the costs are reasonably stable at the lower levels at this thing. There's a slight increase as we're coming in, which we have planned into as part of the transition from Pope to Icon. And that's what is happening. The good news is, take a look at the income line. It has come down, and it's slowly creeping up month after month, which is good news, which is actually a good news. Yeah, we would like to see that slope of that line to be a little bit more higher, but it's still creeping to the higher level, so which is good. So I just wanted to share with you at a high level so that you can see for yourselves. So for all the 7 months, we have a good financial performance under the conditions, because we started, when we thought of the COVID, will be some disastrous conditions as we went along. Fortunately, we've been able to mitigate most of them and actually produce some results in the process that are helpful for the association as a whole, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, with that, the next slide. So I'm just going to cover now a little bit about what impacts the income. The income side is 2 parts. One is assessments that we collect. The second one is all the things we collect in terms of fees, sales side of it, in terms of food and beverage, merchandise, and all that stuff, and some services that we collect for. So let me first show you on the, what is happening with this clicker? Okay, the assessment collection is totally a function of how many homes are closed versus the, wow. This is an sorry about that.
Here it goes.
So in this slide, you will see what are the home closings that are happening actually in this year. The black line is what is the budgeted line. That's the basis that we used in the budget that was given to us from Taylor Morrison. And that dictates how much assessments we'll be collecting month after month. The red line is the actuals. So for the first 3 months, we have done a lot better in terms of closings of new homes than what they planned. That's because the beginning of the year, they misprojected at the end of last year. So, we got a bump, which is good. And then now, they had a very poor months of April and May, where they closed only one home a month. So for those of you, I've answered that question at the last time. That's what made them kind of say, God, the closings are not going well, so we better stop some construction activity. But now come back and take a look at what happened in June and July. It has come back. It's paralleling the line of what we projected in budgets. So they're back at the same level as what they planned. So if you continue with this to the year end, we should have no problem in collecting all the assessments we have budgeted. Taylor Morrison is kind of indicated because I've gone back to them and asked them, what do you project for the remaining 5 months? They're actually saying that it'll get below the line, below the budgeted line from their point of view. It's okay. We have collected enough because we are about 32,000 above budget levels in terms of assessments. We'll probably balance out by the year end if the line comes down. So I just wanted to share with you. So as of today, as of end of July, the total closed homes in our neighborhood are 1,194. That's the total closed homes. That tells you about 56 are left to be closed, okay? Okay, moving to the next slide, I'm going to show you the second part of the revenue, or the income, which is coming from golf fees and other services in golf, and food and beverage, which are the two major items of the fees. There are small numbers from other places. But see what happened in terms of golf. I've talked to you lots of times. We have a cycle. We have what's called the high season and then a low season. The high season in golf starts around November timeframe. So November, December, January, February, March is the high season, kind of a number. And you can see the January, February, March numbers are very high. And then we took a nosedive in April in terms of all the fees and other service income we collect in golf because of shutting the course down to outsider play and restricting it only to members. And now you can see it's slowly starting to come back. April and May were the lowest the months with the lowest outsider fees we collected. Now we rebounded back a little bit in June and July. So the golf revenue is coming back and it's really above budget levels, even with all this actually, so which is nice to see. And you can see the food and beverage. Food and beverage started the year extremely well. In February, if you take a look, actually culinary center was profitable. With all the stuff we have went through last year thinking, will we ever get to profitability? We hit profitability in February in culinary center. Unfortunately, the COVID issues came up and then we dropped like anything from there till April because of closing the dining facilities, indoor dining, and all we did was for a couple of months only catering to within the community, take out food. So, but the good news is you can see starting June and July, there is a slow increase in what's happening in food and beverage. So that's a good sign again, which tells us we can kind of assume this is going to continue in that fashion, slightly trending upwards, unless we hope we never have another shutdown issue with that. But without that, we should be seeing that both golf and food and beverage will slightly continue to trend up. And as you come to end of the year, in November and December, golf would shoot up because of the cycle that we talked about. Okay, this is the only slide that's going to have numbers. Okay, I just spend with me a few minutes to understand what this slide contains. On the top, the columns are, the second column is the assessment income that we collect, that all of you pay quarterly. The second column is all the revenue or income from sales, fees, and services in each of those areas. The fourth column is a term I use called cost of goods sold, okay, associated with expenses. That's the direct cost associated with the services or some of the merchandise we sell in the process. That's why you don't see any cost of goods sold like in home landscaping, for example, because there are no services there other than direct payment to the vendor that's providing that service. And then the fifth column is operating and maintenance expenses, which are the maximum amount of all the expenses we have. And the last column is the cash surplus or shortfall for those particular areas. Remember, we pay 4 assessments, isn't it? Golf members pay golf assessment. Every member pays HOA assessment. And people that live in single-family homes pay a home landscaping assessment. And everybody living in the community pays a reserve assessment. I'm not showing the reserves here because it had no impact because of the COVID or in any of the spending activities, so I just taken it out to make it simple. So if you take a look here, in essence, what it's saying is, in golf, you can see what is the assessment income, and combine the 2 columns, second and third, that gives you the total income, subtract from it the expenses, it'll give you the cash surplus. So golf is showing a cash surplus for the first 7 months of about $970,000, which is pretty good. And then get down below home landscaping. It's showing you a cash surplus just because at the end of the year, we have budgeted to spend $160 per home for mulch. So if you really add that at the year end, actually the home landscaping is really, in terms of expenses, are higher than the revenue at this stage. Because we have to have for each home at the year end $160 per home, and roughly 1,200 homes, that's about 940 homes for a single family. That'll take you roughly about 160,000 we should have. So we are short by about $20,000, $30,000 as you go to the year end on that one. So, but the biggest thing is at the bottom line, you can see we are doing better in terms of cash surplus of about $420,000 this year, which I don't think any of us saw that as we went into the COVID shutdowns, that we'll be generating cash in this whole process. And part of that 420,000, roughly, there's 25,000 coming from audit that has kind of reclassified some expenses between 2019 and 2020. Even without that, that's a significant performance in this time frame, actually. So we should all be kind of glad on where we ended up. When you don't make money, it's one issue. When you make money, there's a different issue, isn't it? Somebody in the north city called Washington looks out for that, okay, and saying, what can they do when you start to make money, okay? So we have those issues that will pop up to us. But 420,000 is a great kind of a number at this stage. So some of you might ask, what does it look like as you look forward to the next 3 months? Will we be at this level? Maybe, maybe not. But somewhere between 0 to 200, 300,000 is a high possibility as we look for the end of the year. So we have some cushion to start some projects if we wanted, so that we can be coming close to break even in this process if you have funds available as part of this exercise. So it's going to be a balancing thing as we go along. So that is in terms of performance. Let me talk in terms of what is the impact on assessments with the same slide. for those of you that are thinking, gee, where do I get this data? This data is available in the monthly report. Exactly. So all you have to do is go to the website and look at it, and you see this data every month. Okay? So let me go in. Golf assessment. What is the projected impact? If you look at the slide, and our declarations say golf members are responsible for all the operating and maintenance expenses of the golf course. So for the first 7 months, it's about 1.297 million. That's the operating and maintenance expenses. And what is the assessment we have collected? About 1.33 million. That means golf members have some cushion in terms of the assessment, having 33,000 available at this stage of the year. So if some ups and downs come, we have a cushion of about 33,000 till the year end, if you want to call it. So golf assessments, I would say, there's no increase necessary at this stage based on where we are, and if this kind of a expense and revenue continue to come through. Okay? The second one is home landscaping. I already told you it's slightly short, even though it shows positive, just because we have an year-end spend unless we can manage that at a lower level. You know, generally, historical spending on mulch has been about 160,000 for all the homes combined. So that leaves the HOA assessment. So you see the HOA assessment here, as long as golf has surplus cash flow, which flows in to the part of the HOA, and HOA, you add those two up. Here you have to make a correction because of the 33,000 additional in golf, and add the 77, which is coming from landscaping. If you take those, subtract those two out, there's about roughly 270,000 cushion in the HOA assessment. So in essence, all three assessments, at this stage as we see them, there's no special increase necessary if this kind of a trend continues into the next several months. So I just want to leave you with that view that we do not see at this stage any special assessments necessary unless things drastically change again, which can always happen, but we hope it's not the case. Okay? So that is in terms of assessments, and there is a slide that's in the packet as it's put up, you will see. I'm not going to cover that at this stage. I'm just going to move on because I've already covered it. And again, this concept of impact on assessments is also in the monthly report. You can read it every month. Actually, as we go through this process, you'll be able to see whether we're projecting any increase in assessments or no increase in assessments. And you will see in the monthly report, all four of them say none. We don't project an increase in the assessments at this stage. So that is in terms of revenue and expenses. I'll just spend a little bit of time talking about payables and the cash that we have. And it's good for you to understand this. There are three curves on this slide. The black line is the reserves that you're collecting month after month. You can see them increasing because we collect and we haven't spent any reserves amount at this stage. We're just starting to spend them right now. So it'll show up in the next couple of months. On the reserves, what you see is there's a small uptick at the end. That uptick is coming because the way ICON manages accounting of the reserves versus what Pope did. Even though we pay all the reserves for the quarter, in the beginning of the quarter, Pope spread them equally month after month. Whereas ICON says, no, we received the money from the homeowners for reserves. We should put them into reserves. And so that is the uptake. So what ICON is doing is, in the first month of the quarter, they put the entire month of reserves received into the reserve account, and the next 2 months it will stay flat except for the interest. So that's the difference. That's the first thing I wanted to tell you, which is different. But at the end of July, our reserve balance is about 1.2 million. So we have built that quite a bit in the last couple of years to come up to 1.2 million in a reserve fund balance, which is pretty good for an association of our size. Now take a look what I call operating funds. That's what is the cash in the bank at the end of each month. Take a look at the beginning of the year or end of December, which is very revealing. We had only funds in the bank of about close to 600,000. Look at the other line, which is the accounts payable. What we have to pay to our vendors was more than what we had in our bank. That's how Taylor Morrison left us. So they took out all the working capital pretty much in this process by not giving us the $568,000 at the end of the year. So we started the year with nothing left as a working capital. And as we looked through with the COVID issues, we were very concerned. Where are we going to get the cash from if we needed it? I want you to understand that, because this is a typical thing all the associations go through a transition. So that's how we started. So I've been working with Pope to say, how do we kind of decrease the amount of payables that we have? We worked slowly together month after month to drop them down, see where we brought them. All the way up to May, we brought them down close to 250,000 to 300,000 from starting a little bit over 800,000. So $500,000 of payable we kind of did without going after additional monies in this process. Okay? So when the payables increase, what happens? Your cash in your bank increases too, because, okay? So why did it happen in December? Because the working capital was not there from TM as we did it. Now you come to May and take a look, there's a bounce up. The bounce up is because of the transition from Pope to Icon and the systems. And you can see Icon is starting to bring the payables down, and they'll come down to normal levels by about August to September timeframe. And you can see that actually in that thing. Our bank balance, if you look at it, will look like, wow. It looks like you're up to 1.9 million. It's an artificial thing, okay? Artificial because this happens to be the first month of the quarter. Remember, we collect assessments. The assessments we collect per quarter is roughly $1.5 million, $500,000 per month. So at the end of the first month, $1 million of assessments that will be used in August and September are sitting in the bank account. So if you take the million out of it, it's 900,000. Other thing that's helping us is the loan amount that we borrowed from PPP. The 600,000 is sitting in that too. So if you take the 1.6 out, or actually, if you want to call it the working capital to run the association, is pretty small at that stage, okay, that we have right now. It will improve with the agreement we have with TM, okay, but currently, even though it looks good, you got to understand the next 2 months it will drop by $1 million because the assessments are paid, and then the PPP money is sitting, in terms of as a fund sitting in there in the same account. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you in terms of what is happening in terms of fund balances, in terms of where we are. One other slide. As part of revenue is the receivables. Okay, the receivables we come from are from member payments, isn't it? That's where we receive, other than from fees and this thing. In assessments, the only receivables are member payments, and we collect two types of payments. One is quarterly assessments, the other one is monthly club charges. I showed this slide the last time also. So let's take a look at monthly club charges. They peaked, and I gave you the reasons last time. They're trending downwards. Okay, the month after month they've been trending downwards, which is a good sign. Let's see, they should be ending back at about the 30,000 kind of a level. Okay, when I say overdue, that means 30 days after the due date, they still haven't paid. That's what it means. When they say overdue, 30 days after the due date, they're still not paid. The green line is assessments. assessments in the last 3 months have started to tick upwards on the overdue nature. And we are seeing one of the highest levels right now at the end of June, or at the end of July, actually, in terms of the assessments payments overdue. And that's the reason, if you remember, last month, we passed a policy to collect assessments, and we'll kind of close it today with further actions to take and to see how we can kind of get this under control a little bit in terms of payments, both for quarterly and the monthly collections that are done. Okay? So that is in terms of, I'm going to switch now and go to the next process, which is where are we in the 2021 budget process. This is a slide that you probably have tough time reading through at home. All we can say is the whole budget process has been laid out. Really a shout out to Frank Harris, who has done all the work in terms of developing the process, getting alignment with ICON in this process on what we're going to do. And it number of steps. The big difference from last year to this year in terms of budget, this year we have requested ICON to propose a budget to us, actually. And you might ask us why. It's a great learning for us as board, because when we're talking and selecting who should be a new property manager, the one area that ICON didn't seek or concerned was being able to meet our budget projections for this year. They said, oh, no problem, we'll meet that. So that gave us a hint that our budget might be quite a bit of money available. That's the only way they can think so sure that they will meet our budget. So if that is the case, why don't we ask them from scratch to tell us what should our budget be, instead of we getting into the way and saying, here is what it should be. So we have asked ICON to give us that budget, and it should be coming out according to the plan sometime, probably next week kind of a thing, to the board, and then we'll take it from there. That's the draft of the budget. As you look through, wherever I put as green color, that means that activity is complete. One major portion of the activity that's completed is all the homeowner groups or liaison groups giving their top 3 priority items to the strategic planning group. And strategic planning group kind of bringing all of those items together and kind of meshing up how do they match with input coming from the homeowners, and then what should the strategic plan be kind of a thing. They're kind of bringing all that together. That activity is completed. Again, I want to thank them for doing that as part of this process. And you will meet some of them as they come up to talk about it later on this year. And the other part of the green is, I told you ICON has been working on the budget, and they'll give it out to us probably next week. That's about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of schedule, because we have not done certain things in between, as you can see. The reason we have not done it is there's no use talking about which projects we're going to work on until we know what are the funds available. There's no use asking a lot of people to estimate the projects if we don't have any funds available. So we said, let's take a look at the draft budget first, and then we decide based on the amounts available, what projects should we go after. That's the basis for not completing some of the stuff above. It's by design. Only message I want to leave with you is the last date for approving the budget. The date is November 2nd, and there'll be a board meeting on November 2nd to approve the budget. So for those of you that are interested in it, mark it on your calendars. That's the date the budget would be approved, and everything else is leading towards that activity. Okay? So that is the budget process, and I've covered 2 things. The last remaining item is what I talked to you, is the concept of financial robustness. Oh, this is going backwards. Okay, so what does financial robustness mean? What do you have to do to be financially robust as an association? First thing, you have to have income and expense planning and monitoring. You have to develop a plan and say, how am I going to spend it, for what I'm going to spend it, and then you monitor it. And so actually, we are doing that. And I'll tell you how we are doing it. We have a robust annual budgets that we develop. We have done it last year and the previous years for income and expenses. And there's an effective monitoring tool set in place, actually. Monthly, monitoring income, expenses, and also taking corrective actions. Just monitoring is of not much value unless you take corrective actions. So those two activities are actually happening. Next one. Working capital management is the second part of it in the shorter term. Okay, when I say shorter term, it's within the kind of yearly kind of a thing. An area that we can improve on is really sound management of receivables, payables, and inventory. We just started that. That's why it's yellow. And we got to get into further where it becomes a robust process, actually, in those three areas. And then other thing is maintaining appropriate operating account balances. If you asked me last week, that would have been red. Fortunately, it's green today because we know we're going to get a payment from TM, that we could utilize that. We communicated that in the last week's meeting, actually. Okay, so that's the reason why it's made green. Lastly, this is the big thing that we have to do very well, is capital planning and management, actually, for longer term enhancement of the community and sustainability for both. This is a big thing that we have to get our hands around and say, how are we going to do it? There are three components as being proposed there. One is the reserve funds, which we have been collecting. The challenge with the reserve funds is those are for long-term deferred maintenance, replacement, and refurbishment of existing assets. Okay? And that's how it's defined by the Florida statutes. So reserve funds are very controlled in terms of what can be used, and the developer started this, so we have to follow that process, actually. And they can only be used for approved, identified components. That means every budget cycle, we got to go in and say, here are the total reserve funds, and here are the items we're going to use them for. You can't deviate from that. You can't go in and say, I'm going to add a new item once it's been approved. You got to wait till the following year. Or if it's not there, you can't use that money for other items that are not listed. And that is the statutory requirement within Florida. So that's the reserve funds. I'll come to the bottom one, the construction defect funds. Last week, we wouldn't have had it with the agreement signed. That's only for what I would call a short-term funding source, okay, that we got from TM funds we'll use for addressing the construction defects. What we really do not have, I know Dick has been saying this for some time, is what we call improvement funds. These are the funds to improve or add new facilities that are part of the strategic plan that we developed or comes from the input from the members. However they come, we don't have any source how we're going to fund those items right now. So how do we get improvement funds? If we don't have that, that is a gap in our financial way of handling our association needs. So that is the big gap we have right now. So if we do all these things, we should be getting very sound financially as an association in this process. So I just put up something in terms of saying there's a gap. If I don't tell you how we're going to fill the gap, then it's not worthwhile having this conversation. So here's a proposal it's a proposal for you to think through in this whole process, how we're going to fill the gap. For improvement funds, what the proposal is, we start to commence funding into this improvement fund bucket starting September, which is not far away. How do we fund it? Every existing home sold contributes $2,500 to the association. Use those funds from the existing home sales to fund the improvement fund requirements that we have as an association. And actually, our declarations permit this. They specifically state this. Use these funds to kind of improve the association needs. So it's already there, and the board can make that judgment call and move on if we wanted to. So based on historical data, we sell about 50 to 60 existing homes a month. I'm sorry, for the year, 50 to 60 existing homes a year. So the projected contribution from those would be about 125 to 150,000 per year into this fund, which is just a start. I'm not saying that is sufficient, but it's at least a start once we start to do that. Currently, I got to tell you some of you will say, what are you using those funds for right now? Isn't it? We've been collecting that for the last 3-4 years. Currently, the working fund contributions are really used as an operating income at this stage. So that's becoming part of our income. So if you do this, minimal impact in 2020, because I just showed you the financial performance is significantly better, so it's not going to have any impact. 2021 budgeting, we will evaluate as part of the process by reducing this operating income of roughly the $120,000 to $150,000. What is the offset that we can do in terms of expenses so that we don't have a big impact on the assessments in this process? So that is a proposal, actually. We're not going to vote on it today. Just kind of sharing with you. Depending on the need, the board has to look for additional options for funding into this thing, because the current thinking is 125 to 150,000 may not be sufficient for improvement funds as we look along. This is one approach of doing it instead of going and asking for special assessments every time when you want to do improvements, okay? So it's actually planning it, tying it to what the strategic plan says, and having some funding sources available so that you can prioritize and do some work in terms of improvements to the association assets. The funds, if we approve this approach, will be maintained in a separate account and will have to be capitalized when spent. Okay, that's just a follow-up item than anything else. That's basically what I wanted to cover in terms of, let me close it down, is to say we'll continue to ensure that the property manager manages expenses to match the service levels. Based on the revenue being generated. There's no use, kind of having a lot of people in culinary center if we don't have enough people coming in to serve, okay? So they've been managing it well. We'll continue to do that. We have to ensure timely completion of the 2021 budget. We have to formalize the monitoring and review process for those payables, receivables, and inventory and cash. Other thing, some of you might have asked, it's good that we did not have any need to tap into the line of credit this year, okay, even though we have one available. And as a projection, we do not foresee a need for it for the rest of the year. Okay, so the line of credit, we got it approved. It just sits, and we can decide as we go into the remaining part of the year what we want to do with it, if anything else. Otherwise, it'll expire if we don't pay the fees. That's all it is. And then formalize the capital management process that we just talked about. Okay, that's the presentation in terms of giving you an overview of the finances and where we are, and what some of the thinking we're going through in terms of getting robustness in the financial stuff. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Krish, we've got a couple of questions here. If you can take a few, I think we've got 6. The first question being, how much of the golf surplus is from golf members?
I got to go back to the slide. Okay, I put on this slide how much of the golf surplus is from the members. The assessment income covers the operating and maintenance expenses. The assessment income in golf comes from golf members. The fees, sales, and service income of the 1.15 million, I think this year the golf member contribution to it is somewhere between $400,000 to $500,000. Okay, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I can look it up if somebody is very interested. But that's the range. And then from the 1.15, you're subtracting the cost of goods sold, which is about 215,000. Okay, so it's a credit coming into this thing, leaving only about 970,000 flowing out. Okay, so how do you split the 215,000 between those? It's actually the 215,000 is all associated with non-member revenue generation activity. So the simple answer is somewhere between 400 to 500,000 till of the 971 right now.
Okay, thank you. What percentage of golf fee revenue is made up of cart fees from golf homes?
So let me do this. For the golf members, I'm going to make a commitment, okay? The next month so, we will do a detailed financial look through them. They can ask all sorts of questions. I'll have all the numbers ready for them to look through, and I'll do that at that stage.
Great,
Okay.
thank you. How are unpaid HOA dues and monthly charges accounted for? Not really.
They end up being shown as amounts to be collected, you know, so that's how they end up to be. And those are the total numbers I showed you of what is amounts to be collected, okay? They're called delinquent accounts, actually.
Or receivables? Yeah.
They're part of receivables, actually.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. And where does excess revenue, if any, go to at year end?
Great question. As under the Florida statutes, because we collect assessments at 4 levels, at the end of the year, we got to come back to each of those assessments and tell you if there's any surplus or anything that's needed for each of the assessments. That means we have to do that for golf. We've got to do that for HOA and landscaping. Reserves we don't have to do because we're just collecting for future replacement of stuff. So the other 3, at the end of the year, we'll come up and say, here's the surplus, and give you an option. Actually, if the board decides to do that and say, yes, either you can have it applied for the next year, kind of a thing, and that's probably where we're going to end up if money is left in any of the assessments. But we have to do what's called in engineering as a mass balance, okay, for golf, HOA, and also for landscaping to see that the expenses and revenue are balanced, if there's a difference in what it is. If it does happen that the expenses are higher than the assessment revenue, then the board will come and tell you that there's a payment to be made.
Okay, I believe this question may have already been addressed, but maybe you can just cover it again briefly. But are projects only funded by reserves?
Right now, that's essentially what we've been doing because that's only funding source we had is from the reserves or from the operating accounts. There are times where we have funded few things from the operating accounts. An example of that, these are small items. Item we funded from the operating account was what the board approved at a meeting sometime, I think in April or May, for $15,000 to have a standalone server, okay, for the IT systems. So that server was funded from the operating account because we had no other sources at that stage. And then reserves was not the right place to get that money. And it didn't have a category called improvement funds at that stage, nor did we have deficit funding funds at that stage. So we didn't have any of that. So that was an example where we funded from operating account.
Thank you. I believe this will be addressed when you do the separate golf member financials or report, but what are the projected cart fees, if any, for golf members in 2021?
Hold on to that question until the board approves the fee structure as part of the budget process.
Perfect. And then are working capital funds collected included in the current excess funds?
we do not collect any working capital funds. That's the first thing. We do not collect any working capital funds.
Just the difference.
So the way we managed it till now is if they ran out of cash and they didn't have any access to any cash, they won't pay the vendors for some time until the cash goes up, then they pay the vendors. That's how it's been managed till now. So one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was that about the $568,000 coming from Taylor Morrison as a settlement from last year's 2019 deficit funding be used as a working capital because that is the only source we have.
I think the question was directed towards the working capital contribution that's collected as part of home sales. The 2,500.
That's 2,500 a home. Okay.
Yes.
That was, as I told before, that is going as just an income into the association. It was being used as a part of an income coming in.
And we have a question here that's asking about how we're going to plan on collecting delinquent HOA dues, but I believe we're going to get to that here further on in the agenda, so we'll just talk about that when we
Hold
get
on to
there.
the question, see if we can address it when we vote on how we're going to do that.
That's right, we will. And then, let's see, I think maybe just this last one. Can you explain the details of the cash shortfall of $654,000?
Okay. Remember, we collect one assessment for HOA. It's not broken down saying, here is the HOA assessment for food and beverage. Here's the HOA assessment for infrastructure. Here's the HOA assessment for, let's say, spa. We don't do that. The way it is set up is one assessment to support all the services and all the infrastructure that's not part of golf or that's not part of landscaping, home landscaping. So all that is collected as one assessment. As developers set it up, his basis is that excess cash flow from golf would fund the HOA needs. And that's the reason why you see in the HOA it's negative, because that's how it was set up.
Okay, I think we have hit all of the questions. There's one other question here that's been asked, but it's regarding one of our new business items, so we'll just hold on to that till we get there.
Thank you.
Do you need a break from talking? Do we want to switch up some of these agenda items? Or are you okay?
I'm okay.
All right. I'm just making sure. Just
I'm
making
okay.
sure.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping me on my toes.
Okay, then I believe we can move on to new business unless there's other questions from
No,
the board.
we can move on right now to new business.
Huh?
Good mo-
You ready? Okay. So the first item under new business then is the Paycheck Protection Program, which I understand Krish is going to take that as well.
Yes, he is.
Yes, please. Okay. I refer to the Paycheck Protection Program as PPP, or or Payroll Protection Program. If you remember what happened around the March time frame of this year, we have applied for the PPP loan as part of what the government was offering at that stage. Remember, when we applied, we were projecting a worst-case scenario. All of you remember me standing up and saying, there's probably something in the range of $700 increase in terms of assessments by the year end. That's what we kind of projected, taking the worst-case scenario, because we didn't know how the revenue is going to be with all the shutdowns. And then, at the same time, you saw what I showed you, that we had lack of funds for working capital, because we started the year with so much in payments and very little in the bank account. So we really had no sources of working capital at that stage. That's how we applied for the PPP. We never thought we'll get the funds. It was total surprise to us when it was approved, and we received, it was approved, I think, on a Friday. On a Monday, our bank account got put in with $629,715. And that's how it came in. We said, fine, we got the money. If the worst case scenario does play out, we can ask for forgiveness. Okay? That was our plan. That's the background you got to remember on why we went to this, getting this loan, because we thought we can get forgiveness out of it. Okay?
I just noticed a couple of comments, people are having some problems hearing you,
Okay.
whether it's speaking louder or taking the mask off.
Let me try it again, please. Sorry about that. When we applied for the PPP loan around March of this year, we were expecting a really, what I would call a worst case scenario in terms of operating performance, needing a lot of cash. Second thing was, we did not have much cash in our bank, and we did not have access to where we can get some additional capital. So as those two as the drivers, we actually went and applied. Luckily, we got approved. We were surprised that we got approved. And then an amount of $629,715 hit our account in a few days after we were approved. And we communicated that to all the homeowners as soon as we got the money, saying we were approved. So that is the background. Okay, now let's take a look at where we are and what are we going to look to the future. Our current HOA financial performance, as I showed you right now, is significantly better than what we projected. Significantly better. And the worst case scenario that we projected did not come to fruition, okay? Because we managed the expenses quite well in this time frame. So for doing a good job, we got good thing, but we have these funds left in our system. And then other thing that we did was, because this tells you we were not sure at all we'll get selected for PPP, so we also have applied for a line of credit with the bank, assuming that we won't get it, so we have some access to the working capital. We applied for a line of credit. That was approved a week before we received the funds, actually. Roughly a week before we approved the fund. So our financial performance is better, and we have access to capital if we needed it right now. Okay? So, what happens? One of the conditions when we accepted the PPP loan, that the small business that got the loan has to certify there's an economic need. Okay? And at that stage, we definitely had an economic need because we were furloughing people. Okay? Okay, and we had an economic need. And now, if I stand up now and look back, I don't think we can state that the HOA meets right now the economic need condition required by the PPP. To be frank, we won't meet it right now if you look at it. So it's after the fact. So we went with one idea into it. It turns out it's a lot better, so there's nothing problematic about it. So we have done well to have a good position. So the recommendation to the board is that we return the entire PPP amount that we received as a loan, and along with the 1% interest, as soon as it's approved by the board, because we have sufficient funds available to refund it away. And we can't stand up and pass the test that we have an economic need as a HOA to be able to keep that loan. I'm sure we'll qualify for forgiveness. That is not an issue. But we won't meet the condition saying that we have an economic need for that loan. So the proposal to the board is that we refund the entire PPP amount, and we have to do it with the 1% interest that we got to pay for that, and that will be about somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000, along with the $629,000 we have received. So that is the recommendation to the board.
Okay, thank you, Krish. It's, I think as a community, we should at least acknowledge the fact that when this all happened with the COVID and with what Chris just explained to us, our circumstances was quite, or could have been quite dire. So we took action. We went for the PPP loan, and we also went for a line of credit loan. We got both. Now today, because of very good management and great teamwork here, we're in a position to pay it all back with the $2,000 of interest, which is 1% for the time we had it. And with that, I think I will look for a motion to do.
I'll make the motion that we accept Chris's recommendation that the entire PP loan amount be refunded with the 1% interest as soon as approved by the board, hopefully tonight.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. We will give all the money back. Next on the agenda.
Excellent. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the cafe change to pizza kitchen, and I believe, Dick, you're taking that item?
Thanks, Tessa. I'm going to give Chris an opportunity to get it up here on the screen before I start. Just to give everybody, I'm going to be talking about the conversion of the cafe, which is, unfortunately for us, shut down right now. We're using it more as a takeout center for our culinary food. Okay, Chris has it up. Want to go ahead and move on, Chris? All right, your thing's working. That's great. All right. The original vision for the cafe from Taylor Morrison was to use this as a, cafe, coffee, breakfast, lunch type center. Very good idea. It was a nice amenity for the community, but in terms of revenue or cost for the space, it wasn't probably the best use of that space or the best idea. In fact, the initial 3 months before the board took over were pretty dismal. When we got into peak season, 1 month we actually, I think, made a $95 profit, which is not much to speak of. But after that, people kind of lost interest, and it really trended downhill, and it was not a popular pace. We only had one person staffing it, and what you probably don't see in the numbers that we saw in the numbers were the food waste. There was a lot of food waste there on a daily basis in the cafe. So with COVID, it was shut down, and we had an opportunity to explore some of the ideas that people previously had come up with for that space, even as early as last year before the board took over. The OTG group, especially the food and beverage group, suggested at that time to look at the thought of selling pizzas out of there. So that's where we headed in pursuing this new idea. So I have a slide here about what can the Pizza Cafe offer to the community. In my opinion, an awful lot. We have a carry-out business. We can use the pizza for a carry-out business. And carry-out now with restaurants and food facilities everywhere with COVID has become a big part of their revenue. A lot of people still don't feel comfortable eating even with the social distancing and the spacing, so they still like to eat out, so they do takeout. So takeout is a normal part of business now, and I think that'll continue on for some time. Lunch and dinner, including pizza, hot sandwiches, garlic nuts. When I say Pizza Cafe, and we'll talk about that as we go along the slides, it's not just pizza. There are going to be a lot of opportunities to serve other food items. They're hot food items with this new oven that I'm going to be talking about that we want to purchase. And one of the big things is the blended food costs. And what I mean by that is a lot of the food we sell in our outlets, some of it there's not as much profit in. Some of our higher-end meals, some of our fillets and things like that, even though they're a healthy price to pay for the meal, the cost of the goods for that meal is very high also. So we like to offset that with some options that we can have a lower cost of goods and we can actually make more money on. So the blended cost, we have an average cost at the end of each month on what we make on our food. So we want to have both of those types of options. And I know that as I drive around the neighborhood at night with my dog Bill on the golf cart, I see a lot of neighborhood driveway parties and things like that. You can enhance it with pizza now, hopefully. And another fun idea, I think, as we go along is the possibility that we can get the residents involved in naming some of our options. The Sorrento, the Napoli, the Costello. You get the gist here. The Bonito, the Tivoli. We can do this with pizzas. We can do this with hot sandwiches. We can do a lot of fun things with the cafe to get the whole community involved in it. Next slide, Chris. So what is the plan? The plan obviously is to utilize the space, and I'm talking mainly about pizza right now, but we want to include gelato. Gelato is a very popular food item, and it has a cost of goods where it's a good option for us in terms of revenue. There will be some equipment we need to purchase to properly outfit the space and the culinary staff to operate this new space. But the plan will be to close off the space for a short period of time, do a revamp. We'll have to revamp cabinetry, countertops. There'll be some different equipment that'll be brought in. It won't really take all that long, but we'll want to get some new signage and let the food and beverage group work with our chef and Sandra and Mr. Barnes and come up with a really good menu to kick off this endeavor. So let's get down to the costs. We had a budget item for $12,500 in the 2020 budget that was approved to purchase this pizza oven. The cost of the oven is approximately $10,000. By the time we paid freight and everything with it, we were close to the budgeted number. In fact, we were slightly under, but we used almost all of it up. There was not money budgeted for the installation. So I have a slide here that left us $2,500. That's actually a misnomer. I apologize for that. When I said $10,000 originally, by the time we paid freight and everything in, we didn't have that extra $2,500. The revamp of the cabinet area, we have a contractor that is coming in. He is involved with a lot of the quick service type restaurants, Little Caesars, a lot of the other quick service restaurants in this part of Florida, and gave us just a tremendous price, we think, on the revamp. With the cabinet revamp, the change in electrical work that has to be done, the countertops, everything, was $9,100 all in, and that, to me, was absolutely a tremendous deal. And then we'll need about $8,000 for additional equipment. And the $8,000 is really a very conservative number. We don't think we'll need all that, but we wanted to put that number in there just in case there's some unforeseen things. There may be some stuff that we have available in the current kitchen and current inventory that we can use that we don't have to purchase. So flipping over, Chris, to the next slide, how much do we actually need? How much are we asking for tonight? With everything that we did not have budgeted, we're somewhere. I'm going to get through my slides here because what I'm reading is a little bit off. Yeah, okay. We need about $17,000, just a little bit over $17,000 total. So, and I apologize, I had printed out an older version that I had in front of me. The $17,000 is what was unbudgeted, and I'm going to get into the next slide about some project information. But the $17,000, when you look in terms of the cost of goods for pizza, the revenue generated from the gelato, and some other ideas that we've already had some residents talk to us about, is the cafe concept completely gone? And the answer is no. I mean, the cafe, if we choose, if there's a business need, and we don't want to wait till 11 o'clock to open for pizza and sandwiches and everything, and then gelato and pizza through the evening, if somebody wants to just come up and have a cup of coffee and a Danish in the morning or a muffin or something, and there's a business need to staff it in the morning, we can still do that. So that'll be up to the community as we go along. The large commercial coffee machine that is in the cafe will remain. So that option's there. And I feel strongly that we'll hear from a lot of people about that and get some varying opinions on what we need to do there. I want to talk a little bit about the oven that we're purchasing. And I want to give a lot of kudos here to the food and beverage group in general. Mark Prusnell that leads that group, he's the chair of the committee. A lot of people know Mark is involved with Little Caesars. He actually owns a lot of stores. And Mark has really helped us out with a lot of the information that we needed to justify this project. But more importantly, Mark has access to a lot of equipment that we wouldn't ordinarily be able to purchase ourselves. So this Ovention oven, S1600, that we're purchasing is an oven that was specifically designed for Little Caesars. And Mark's been able to get us an option to purchase this. And this thing is fantastic. And what's really fantastic about it, when we first started looking at the cafe in general, the only thing we saw out there online were commercial ovens that had to be vented. So when you're talking about setting up a huge commercial oven and having to vent it up through the roof of the culinary center, it came with a very big installation cost. This new Ovention oven requires no additional fire suppression and no additional venting. And it is absolutely an amazing little oven. And Little Caesars is starting to use them in a lot of their stores to supplement the original ovens that were in there. The contractor that Mark was able to secure for us also does a lot of the, like I said, a lot of the revamp work for a lot of the quick service restaurants in this part of Florida, including Little Caesars. And frankly, I'm going to give the kudos again. The food and beverage group, since the first of the year, again, worked with Pope. They've been trying to get involved with Sandra and the Icon team a little bit more. A very solid group of talented residents that they're very strongly opinionated, but they are because they've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience in the food and beverage industry. But a lot of what we're looking at here and talking about today wouldn't have been possible had we not had that group of individuals in this community. So kudos to all of them, and Mark with the lead in that group. Tremendous amount of experience there. I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the costs and revenue. Typical costs for pizza, including costs of goods and labor, which is huge here, anywhere from 50 to 55%. So depending on what type of pizza you're serving or what type of sandwich you're serving, you're looking at a pretty good profit off of each item. And it does. There's just a lot of good profit in pizza. Gelato runs the cost of goods of gelato around 20 or 25%. So again, it's another no-brainer to have an item here. And I actually think gelato will go over well in the community. I know a lot of people that I talk to go outside the gate to get ice cream and everything else, and it would be nice to have it right in here. And it'll tie in well with the next project I'm going to talk about it also. You'll be able to get your pizza or get your gelato, go sit on the back porch of the Culinary Center and enjoy the view. And again, if we do neighborhood takeout, which we plan to, serve the Culinary Center, in other words, add some pizzas onto the menu at the Culinary Center. Longer term or shorter term, however we look at it, we can even be running pizzas down and put them on the menu at the Bahama Bar. I think it would go over really well down there with a few beers and coming off of a round of golf. I think that is nothing. There's nothing there, but what I see is positive cash flow for this space when you look at the products we're going to be selling. Dwayne Brown, when I talked to Dwayne, and this was a few months ago, Bobby, before you were on board, Icon does have experience with some of their other sites in pizza. It's very positive at their other sites. Dwayne was very excited to hear that we had an interest in converting this space to pizza because, and he is the corporate food and beverage director for Icon. He was very excited because he said it's a positive in all the communities that actually have it now. And there are other communities around us that offer pizza as an option. So we're not doing anything different than some people are already doing. And I know it's gone well at some of the other communities around us that have it because they've continued to have it and carry it. And really the last thing here is I really want to thank Mark Prusnell and the Food and Beverage Group for all of the input and help on getting us to where we're at, going through the different iterations of the project from the original oven that had to be vented to where we ended up today. And frankly, a minimal cost. $17,000 is what we're going to be asking for to get all this up and running. I think for what it'll bring to the community, I think it's going to pay dividends in many ways. And the last slide there, I have an actual picture of the oven. And if you go online, you can actually go to Avention's website and see a video of how this thing operates. It's really neat. The reason it doesn't need vented is it actually is like an oven in your home. The doorway on the one side that is partially up, that's a mechanical arm it's actually automatic. You'll hit a button for pizza, and you lay it on the conveyor belt. The door opens up, the pizza slides in, and the door closes. So the heat is mainly self-contained in the oven, and when the pizza's done cooking, the door opens up on the other side, kicks the pizza out, and closes. And you can set it for sandwiches or any type of hot item that you want to run through there. It's all programmable. So many uses for this oven besides just pizza. So I don't know, is there any questions, Alan? This oven can cook 2 pizzas side by side in 3.5 minutes. So it has the ability to kick out a fair amount of pizza.
Okay, well, trying to keep up on the questions here for you. All right. Let's start with, does the pizza cost count towards our yearly food and beverage minimum?
Yes, it would.
All right.
It's a menu option.
Okay. Great. Next question. Food and beverage is losing money now. How will this help when we take more money away from the Culinary Center and the Bahama Bar?
We don't look at it as taking money away. Again, I talked about the blended food costs. It just gives people another option, another food option when they do come to the Culinary Center. Right now, we're kind of in an odd scenario right now with COVID and the off-season combined. I think once we get more people back, we'll see the Culinary Center uptick a little bit like we did last year. Until we can completely get rid of the COVID issue, it'll never get back to the way it was. But I don't see this, and most people I talk to don't see this as a counter food takeout business that it would affect the overall Culinary Center or Bahama Bar business. We think it would just be an adder.
Yeah. My only concern is the proximity to my office. I'm going to have to probably negotiate if this passes, like a fitness membership or something into next year's salary or something. Is there a projected time frame for recouping the funds used for startup?
That's a very good question, and we actually have some data on that, but it's hard to use that data given our current circumstances because that data is really based on probably what it was like before COVID. So I could have included it, but I didn't want to because of that. We don't have good data because we're in unknown territory right now. I do know that a lot of people like pizza. I do know that I, for one, like meatball sandwiches. There's a lot of things that, and I've talked to, like I said, a lot of people that don't want the heavy foods will come in the evening for a cup of coffee and a gelato. And I'll be one that does both.
Sure. A question specifically to the food, and I don't know if you're there yet, but the question has come up of whether or not the pizza and sandwiches will be made fresh or if they will be frozen and then reheated.
No, and that's something that the food and beverage group will be able to help the chef and Sandra with. The plan is to have everything fresh.
Perfect.
Make
And-
dough on a daily basis and have everything fresh.
Perfect. And any thoughts about adding a cauliflower crust?
We can do.
These are really important details.
Well,
People,
no, it's
inquiring minds
it's
want
actually
to know.
a very good question because in today's day and age, if you don't offer healthy options, you actually lose some revenue. So yeah, I'm sure
Very true.
there'll be some healthy options along the way.
I'll second that.
Wonderful. Agreed. Has there been any exploration into whether or not the insurance costs will go up, adding the pizza oven or the additional electric, anything like that?
There hasn't been any investigation by us, but I'm being told by Mark that it doesn't even require additional fire suppression in the building, so I don't anticipate an insurance issue. And Steve may be able to speak to that.
I could speak to that.
Okay.
Absolutely not. We have plenty of insurance that would cover it. Yeah, that's not going to be an issue in regards to insurance or liability or fire.
Wonderful. And some concern about potential wait times if this becomes really popular. Is there room to add another unit if it's very popular?
The answer is as small a space as this takes up and the fact that we don't need additional venting or anything, yeah, with the cost of these ovens, they pay for themselves in no time. So there's already been talk about trying to put one at the Bahama Bar, and if we need to add another one in our kitchen, I'm sure we can find a place for it.
And has there been any thought put into in terms of pricing and making sure that it's competitive for the area?
There's been some discussion. I don't want to comment on that. I want to let the chef and Sandra and the food and beverage group work on that and get more detail before we talk about that.
Perfect. I think that covers all of our questions there.
Okay, thank you, Dick, and thank you, Food and Beverage and Mark. We are at a point that someone should make a proposal.
Before we do that, I think the motion is it 17,100 fixed?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And that is the amount over the budget.
Wait a minute. I think he's got it. I think he had it in the 8,000.
My suggestion is the total project cost is about 30,000. I think the motion should be for total project cost. How we fund it is 12,500 from the budgeted amounts and the remaining from the non-budgeted amounts. But we're approving a project and the total project cost is 30,000 roughly.
Okay.
The only thing the motion is for tonight is for the additional funds to set up the cafe. We don't need to approve the other.
I understand. I'm just proposing. Yeah. So, go ahead.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we accept Dick's recommended presentation and the additional funding of $17,100 to get this pizza cafe in place.
Any discussion?
Any discussion?
Just one, because I see where Chris is coming from. Even though it's $17,100 over the $12,000 budgeted, it's still a total $30,000, and we as a board would have to vote on any budgeted item anyway. Just because it's in the budget doesn't mean we're already voted to spend the money, or am I wrong there?
No, you're wrong. Things that were approved from the budget last November through the last budget that was made for Taylor Morrison, all those items are approved. So any dollars in regards to that is already approved, and this is the excess amount.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. All right.
So we had discussion. Do we have any other discussion? That was a good point, Bob, though. Thank you. Do we have any other discussion? Without further ado, then we shall vote. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is the fountain installation. Dick, do you need a break? Do you need a trade-off here? Or all right, you're good?
This actually shouldn't take.
Okay, then you're next.
While he's getting set up, just a reminder to all the board members, when you're speaking, please use the microphone.
And if you need a minute to get set up, I did have a request that people want to see Bobby. They want to see him on the camera, and they would like us to pan over and have him give a wave and say hello, a little
will say
introduction.
that I was remiss in not introducing him at the last meeting, but I think because he was so new, he was okay with that. Bobby Barnes is our new general manager, and he's captain of the team. And we are very pleased for him to be here. And I think everyone at Icon here is also very pleased for having Bobby here. And I'm not sure you want to say a few words at this point.
Want to pass the microphone down?
Needs a microphone.
Here, I go. You keep your.
Oh, who needs it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but just if you like to say a few
Nope,
words.
I'm happy to, it's nice to be thought of and called out in the meeting, so thank you. I don't have anything prepared, but I am very excited to be here. I look forward to future meetings, and I probably enjoyed these meetings the most out of anyone last Thursday and tonight because it's so educational. And like I said in the newsletter on Friday, I've been very impressed with the work of the board, and I've also been equally impressed with the involvement with the community. So very happy to be here. Thank you for the shout out, and always my door is always open, my email is always open. So if anyone has any questions offline that they want to ask me personally, I'll be happy to answer that. So thank you again. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Bobby. I'll defer back to Dick.
Okay, Krish. We have another project I'm going to talk about tonight, and it's a pond fountain project on the pond right next to number 18 Green, the one you see when you sit on the back porch of the Culinary Center and look over the hill. My first slide, my first bullet point is when you sit on the back porch of the Culinary Center and enjoy the wonderful view, and believe me, I love that view, especially in the evening as the sun's going down, you have to ask yourself, what's missing? How could this be better? And the answer's obvious to me. We need a huge, beautiful fountain on number 18. And then as the sun goes down, we need an LED kit coming up out of the water that shines on the fountain at night. So that's what we're going to talk about doing here tonight. There's been this idea, along with others, have been bandied around since last year when I first got on. We started the infrastructure team. People have approached us and talked about all kind of different ideas that they wanted to see happen, either on the bank, going down the hill from the back porch, or the pond, or some other type of feature that would enhance that view. We actually approached Taylor Morrison at one point last year and asked them if they would install an fountain, and you can imagine the result that came from that. They basically gave it back to us. But I want to talk about, on the next slide, some of the benefits. So we all understand that from the aesthetic standpoint, they're beautiful. Large fountains during the day are beautiful, and at night with lights, they're even more spectacular. But they have a ton of other benefits, and a lot of it has to do with the health of the pond in general. It helps circulate water. It aerates the water. It reduces algae growth, fewer dissolved toxic gases, less odor coming from the lakes when we get really hot, humid, dry, or times where everything's stagnant and you are getting algae buildup. Just overall health of the pond is improved anytime you can circulate and aerate water. Aesthetically, I keep going back to this. I can't wait to see what this thing looks like at night with the LED kit on it. Also, great view when you're finishing up a round of golf during the day. I mean, I'd have a hard time coming up to 18 not keeping my eye on the fountain as I'm driving my golf cart up there. I love fountains. And finally, one of the things I really want to make sure that everybody, because it's the last bullet point, but to me it's important. We as a board do a lot of things, and we're going to continue to do a lot of things and approve projects and things, but any time that we can add a visual, pleasing, aesthetic site to the community. We're doing all we can do to help maintain or even enhance our property values and the community value in general. So it's the last bullet point, but to me it's one of the most important things we can do as a board. The first bullet point on this next slide is, and I have on this sign now, the good news. We didn't get this into the budget for this year. The total cost of this project is somewhere around in between $11,000 and $12,000 to do this. But along with everybody on the board and everybody that understands and has had dealings with Jim and Maggie Randolph, really want to express thanks to them because they are donating the cost of the fountain to the community. So the cost of the fountain for the community is zero. And can't thank him enough. And I tell you, Jim's one of the ones all last year that talked to me about 10 different ideas to enhance that area back there. We ended up settling on this, but if anybody ever wants to talk to him, he's got a whole lot of other ideas of things that he'd like to see done back there. He's very enthusiastic about it, and can't thank he and Maggie enough for what they've offered here for the community. And again, the last bullet point there is, you know, out of all the things that Jim talked to me about, and I talked to him, actually Steve was involved in that conversation also one night out in the middle of the street. And he basically just said, look, once we told him what the cost of the fountain was, he said, I want to donate this. I want to get this done, and I want to donate to the community. So he jumped right in with it. So very appreciative of what they're offering to the community. So there are some remaining costs, and that's it's really what I want to talk to you about now. The company is Lake Fountains and Aerations, Inc. They work all over Florida, have a lot of information. We've looked online and looked at some of the reviews from a lot of the other communities that they work with, and it's a lot. These fountain rings they sell are all brass construction, so we don't have to worry about corrosion. The only thing that we ever have to do is maybe shut it down for periods of time, clean it, and then put it back in service. But they'll come in and install the fountain, basically any location in the pond that you want. The pump system, everything is included. The light system's included. The controls are all included. They run all the cabling to the bank, and that is what they deliver with the fountain project. You have to have an electrical company come in then and run power to their connection. So Eric Hager, the Icon maintenance manager here on site, has worked with an electric company in the past, and it's Owens Electric, and he had them come out and look at the whole thing, and we really didn't know what the cost of running power is, because sometimes it can be very big, especially for this. This has a 3-horsepower motor. It's not just like running a 110 circuit. The total cost for Owens to do everything is $3,400. So very minimal amount of money we want to use out of community funds to get this fountain on 18 installed, and that's pretty much the end of the presentation. That's what we're asking tonight from the community is the $3,400 electrical power run that we have to do. But before I close, I just once again want to thank Jim and Maggie Randolph for the donation. It's just tremendous that somebody stepped up and offered that up to us. We appreciate it.
We do have a few questions before the board votes on this item. If the fountain is so beneficial, why is it only being installed on the 18th, and what about the other ponds?
Well, very good question, because if Jim and Maggie hadn't had donated the cost of the fountain, we'd be talking about $12,000 per pond to install that. That's something that we can look at longer term. We do have some ponds that aren't the healthiest for a lot of reasons that may benefit from something like this, but it's something that the board will have to discuss longer term on how we want to handle that.
Was the fountain discussed with pond professionals, and what was their feedback, and also what is the maintenance and life expectancy?
The fountain project was not discussed with pond professionals. All the data and information we got about it was online from a lot of different sources. What was the second part of that question?
What is the maintenance cost and life expectancy?
Okay. There's a 2-year warranty that comes with the fountain itself. So it's a 3-horsepower motor that powers the fountain. And I didn't talk about the specs on this fountain. This is a 3-tier fountain that goes 30 feet in the air and will be completely illuminated at night. So it's spectacular. It's not just, is it up there? Yeah, there it is. Chris has the picture up on the screen, the last slide. It is a spectacular fountain for that size pond. So
There was a concern.
longer term maintenance, we always could have a pump that fails or something like that we may have
Sure.
to replace. But the only ongoing maintenance has to be done is periodically somebody's got to go out there in a little rowboat or a canoe. There's a strainer basket that is attached on the inlet suction. They'll have to pull that up and clean the
Clean it
strainer.
out.
That's it.
There was also a question concerning the water level in that pond, and particularly during the drier months, and how we propose to keep a reasonable amount of water and keep the level high to feed that fountain.
Well, the center of the pond is even though it drops maybe 3 or 4 feet or even 5 feet during the dry season, the pond is mounted on a floating ring, so it'll always be near the surface, and the suction line is submerged so many feet below that. The pond I don't know the exact center depth. I have that information, but where the normal swing in that pond is now won't affect the operation of the fountain.
Okay. There was also just a comment on here to put some thought perhaps into looking into the cost of a plaque to recognize the donation from the Randolphs. That's something the board wants to consider. And then
Something to consider.
lots of comments in favor. So I think
Okay.
we've hit all of our questions. If I missed any, let me know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now, I'm not sure at this point, board members, that we need to vote for an item that's well within the authority of management in regards to anything under $5,000. Well, even the board liaison has that authority. So I'm open to discussion is to think that we need to have a vote. I don't think there should, but I'm open for conversation. No. So it's well within delegation authority. It's going to be done, and really thank Jim and Maggie Randolph, and I believe all the community will enjoy it. As far as other places, we will look at that as we can, and if somebody wants to donate some for another venture, we would consider it as well. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Tessa. Next item.
Before we move on to that item, just a quick question. Maybe I missed it. Is there a time frame for installation on this?
We will have to contact the company. The long lead time will be the permitting to run the power, but Eric will get in contact with Owens Electric and get that process started.
Wonderful. Okay. Looks like our next item is the collections policy, and I believe Krish is queuing that up over there. Are you ready? Okay.
Thank you, Tessa. I know this question was asked in the finance presentation. What are we going to do in terms of assessment collections? So if you remember that, I think a board meeting two months ago, sometime in May, we approved a collection policy for, excuse me, I think I probably will take it. At a board meeting in May, we approved a collection policy for assessments, as we called it at that stage. And then we have also what we call the monthly club charges. So we pay quarterly assessments, we pay monthly club charges. So as we looked at it, there was a lot of discussion whether we need a separate policy for monthly club charges or can we combine these two. So let me share with you what the process is so that you can see the whole thing on one slide, really. The collection process, I've identified both the quarterly assessments and monthly club charges. what's the due date for each of them? For quarterly assessments, it's the first day of the quarter that the assessment is due. And for the monthly club charges, it's the first day of the following month. That means, for example, if it is an August club charge, you're given it you receive it on the kind of the 1st or 2nd or 3rd of September, and the due date would be 1st of October for you to be able to pay that. Okay? So that's what the two due dates are. That's the only difference in terms of what the rest of the policy. I just want to make sure you understand that. The due dates are different, but after that, when is the owner delinquent? If the amount is not fully paid within 15 days after the due date. So there's a 15-day grace period. That's the policy that's been approved from the due date. So that means for quarterly assessments, second quarter assessments, for example, are due by April 1st. That means they'll give you 15 days after that as before you're delinquent in paying that. Same thing for monthly club charges. Now you get 30 days in the month for the club charges plus then the 15, kind of when you're delinquent. So that's the difference. So I put in rest of the delinquent steps as collections as steps. So the first step is you got 15 days after the due date, you still haven't paid it, then you'll get a nice letter kind of saying there's a charge fee of $25, administrative fee of $10, and an interest at 18% starting from the due date. And that comes in really at the 15 days after the due date, really. And if you haven't paid it for 30 days after the due date, a second letter comes in. That's what I call the second collection step. And again, you get another $25 late fee charge, $10 administrative fee charge. So you've been given out 2 notices saying you haven't paid. And you get 15 more days to pay it off. So 45 days after the due date, if either the quarterly assessment or the monthly club charges have not been paid, then that delinquent owner will be referred to the law firm for further action in terms of collection. I believe we should never let it go that far. If I'm a homeowner, I would say why do you even get a first notice? Okay, but if you refer to the law firm, it is probably going to lead to, a lien placed against the home. And all charges from the law firm are to the homeowner at that stage. Okay? So those are the steps. I just want to make sure everybody understands the steps first and the clarity of it. So as we are proceeding, we are kind of agreed that ICON would be sending out the letters on first step, collection step 1 and collection step 2, and collecting the fees and collecting the interest. And then the third step will all belong to the law firm that we delegate this responsibility to. So that's the first step of the process, clarifying this is the policy, and we're saying now the same policy applies to quarterly assessments and monthly club charges, the only difference being the due date for them. Okay? So that's the basic background of already an approved policy. What we're asking for request is, with the amount of work involved in this, we kind of went through and sought input from actually ICON and says, what do we do with this kind of a thing? Unless we kind of implement it and utilize it, and I hope it will lead to kind of saying people will pay it timely. So we're recommending hiring a collection-focused law firm to handle collections versus our current approach of using our general counsel. We've been going to our general counsel. This is not his specialty. He's trying to do us a favor in doing this, and it's involving a lot of time from their side and our side. So we said, is there a law firm that can handle it? And that's their main source of business. And thanks to ICON and Tessa, Uh, they have recommended a law firm, and we have selected them called Mankin Group. Is that how you pronounce it, Tessa? Mankin Group. Mankin Law Group, that have been focused in collections processes. That's their entire business. And they've been practicing for more than 30 years in Florida. They currently have 600 HOAs and condo associations as their clients. And they don't handle anything else than just collections as a whole. So what are the benefits to the association of doing this versus where we are? First, the benefit of the association is this law firm will handle all communications with the delinquent owner after we refer them. So the association is not having kind of any conversations in this. Once it goes to the law firm, they're having all the conversations. There's a continued monitoring of collection status until resolution. Okay, they do that. They do not invoice the HOA or the association for any of the collection work. Nothing comes to the association for the work they've done. They collect all their fees directly from the delinquent owner. So the owner that has not paid is responsible for all the fees. But on the other hand, all telephone calls, emails, status reports are done at no cost to the association. They have a good system. They've sent out what kind of reports they provide periodically and how they process through. This allows the association and property manager to focus on other activities and allow experts to handle the collections, really. Okay? So that's the thing. So the recommendation to the board for board approval is approve the existing collection policy. That's for both quarterly assessments and monthly club charges. Last time we approved it as only for quarterly assessments. Now we're saying let's add it for monthly club charges also. Then hire board approval for hiring the law firm to handle all this association's delinquent collections. And once hired, I think this will be a good practice for us to require the law firm to review our declarations and collection policies to ensure they're all aligned with the Florida statutes and that we have good legal practices embedded. And if they have any recommendations for enhancement, let's hear from them. And finally, once hired, we have to inform all the homeowners that they've been hired and that they're part of the collection process, so that everybody is aware of it. So finally, going through, that's it. So really, in terms of what I'm asking board's approval is for those 4 items that have been laid out on the slide.
Well, before we move forward with that, one of the most asked questions on the feed this evening is, at what point or will privileges be suspended as opposed to sending them to collections, and why not just do that?
Okay, that challenge occurs because when you have assessments, when assessments are not collected, it's not lacking privileges. It is then because assessments is the source of our income, as I showed you in the beginning. So if there's a lot of feedback for monthly club charges to say that we should take off privileges, I would have that reviewed once we approve the law firm and say, how do we get that only for monthly club charges? That means we're separating out a different process for monthly club charges versus assessments. So I would like to wait until we hire them and say, let them give their input if we want to handle that in that fashion.
Sure. Do we know what percentage of homes are delinquent at this time?
On the data I showed you, on the assessments at the end of July, roughly 50 homeowners are involved. They're more than 30 days. On the monthly club charges, about 110 homeowners are involved. That's end of July. It fluctuates month to month. And for those of you that have great interest, one more thing, please read the monthly report, and these numbers are there.
There was a question to please clarify that the due dates should be the first day of the following month. I presume after receiving the statement, right? So, for example, your August charges would be due when?
So August charges, you have to wait till end of the August. They're received in somewhere around September 1 to 3, kind of a time frame. And the current period is roughly 30 days. So I would say is October 1st would be the due date for monthly club charges in this example.
Okay. And is there a cap on the amount of club charges that can be delinquent? At what point is charging being cut off, or is it being cut off?
At this stage, we have not been practicing that. So that's maybe part of the process. All we can do, either give it to the law firm or offer to not have access to any of the facilities and anything. That's an option that we need to look at really in this process.
There's a couple questions here about who's paying legal fees, and I can answer that for the group. The fees, any legal fees generated in terms of hours of service or for letter costs are paid for by the homeowner who's delinquent. That is one of the benefits of using Mencken Law Group, is that they don't actually charge their fees directly to the association. They charge those fees directly to the homeowner who's delinquent, which of course is good for the association to not have to front those fees and those expenses. There's also, of course, an incentive on their part to make sure that that account gets current as quickly as possible, because they don't get paid until the association gets paid. So there's certainly an incentive there for them to work hard for the association. I think we had one more.
Tessa, just on that question, though, I think the question was, what are the fees? The association, HOA doesn't pay, but the delinquent resident pays, but what are they?
They did provide
They
to...
did provide that. From what I understand, they're very reasonable numbers, and that's what all the associations that they're serving are paying, really. So we're not outside the loop. We're kind of within what all the other associations are paying for.
And their fees are very transparent. I think in the agreement that they presented for the board, I believe their fees are all outlined of what they charge for each type of letter and service. Obviously, the only time the association would incur any costs, of course, is if we got to the point where if you were ever going to, and not necessarily on the club charges, but on any other assessments, the lien portion, if they were to proceed with foreclosure at some point, there is a cost deposit that is due for court filings and things of that nature. But of course, that comes before the board for approval. They don't just automatically do that. So that would never be an action that would be taken without the board's knowledge.
I assume as a collection agency, they collect their fee as a percent of what they collect. Is that then added to the delinquent account?
I don't remember. I'd have to look at the...
From what they proposed in the contract, it's an identified fee for the service that they're delivering. So
Yeah,
they
it's
will
a
tell the homeowner what the fee would be actually, and we can publish it once we sign the contract. We can
What
say,
their
here are the
charges.
fees that we agreed with them. So all the homeowners do know what the fees are that they would collect. But the other fees that I talked about, the $10 and the $25, in the first two notices are coming into the association at that stage. That is the work that the association needs to do to kind of send the letters out and kind of keep track of that thing. So those are first as part of the thing. This is after it's been referred to the law firm. They collect all the stuff.
Okay. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that we didn't miss anybody. I know there's a lot of people commenting. A lot of comments, of course, that the suspension is the way to go. Do you recall seeing anything in their contract, and because I don't recall at the moment, about contingency fees? I don't think that they had any contingency fees in there.
I did not see anything in the contract. I'll go back and relook at it again, and the board will look at it.
I would doubt that we would approve that.
There's no contingency fee, that's for sure.
No.
And then there was one comment that says, I suggest that this policy is approved contingent on the law firm confirming that we can suspend charging privileges for those that are delinquent on club charges. Lots of comments to that effect. Another comment that says if we have $250,000 delinquent on monthly charges, that is a significant cash flow problem. The penalties should include immediate suspension of all privileges.
Yeah, as
So
I
just
showed
some
you
of
on
the
the
comments.
as I showed you on the slide, actually, The monthly club charges that are due more than 30 days have come down quite a bit. They're now running about $40,000-$50,000 right now. Okay, I'm hoping they'll come down one more month, so that becomes reasonable at that stage. I understand in February they shot up, and I kind of communicated the reasons at the last couple of meetings what is so. Okay.
Are there any homeowners who are currently more than 2 quarters past due?
The data that I have that comes only shows greater than 90 days, so that's all I can tell you. Is it due
Sure,
more
of
than
course.
that? I can't tell you at
We'd
this
have to
stage.
look at specifics.
We can ask. So that's a good question. I think I know what they're getting at. So I will make sure I'll ask Hector if he can keep that for me by quarters after the 90 days to see if that data is available.
Okay, wonderful.
I like to say something.
Please.
And what I like to communicate to the community is that ICON does a superior job of following up and making sure payments are made in a very tight fashion than I would say our previously committed community manager by far. So I hear all your concerns. I could tell you that the process that ICON will be doing is going to be a lot tighter and should provide the type of results that would keep us away from having to make real punitive charges to a resident. But be clear, if we need to do that, we will do that.
Great, thank you. And just to clarify, we did have one other question asked as to whether or not the association gets a copy of the letters that are sent by the law firm, and the answer to that is yes, we do. So we do have access to that information. So we are on to the appointment. Chris, are you going to take that?
Yeah, I think I'm asking for board approval, kind of the 4 items that are mentioned there. One is the policy applies to both assessments and monthly club charges, to hire this firm and to do some due diligence before that, actually in the process. And once hired, inform all the homeowners. I can add to that if you want, the rates that the firm is going to charge to the homeowner. If you want to add that, that's fine to that.
So are you looking for one motion or 4?
It's maybe one motion is better, but I can defer to Don.
I will make a motion, and before I do, I want to remind everybody that if we accept this collection policy, it doesn't mean that it's set in stone. Like Krish said, when they come back and tell us what we should be doing, not doing according to the declarations, all of this can be revisited once again to make sure that we get it perfect, or as perfect as possible. So, with that said, I'm moving that we approve the existing collection policy for both the quarterly assessments and monthly charges as presented, that we hire Mankin Law Group to handle all associations' delinquent collections. Once hired, we require Mankin to review our declarations, collections policies to ensure all are aligned with Florida statutes and good legal practices. Any recommendations for enhancement? Once hired, inform all homeowners of their role in the collection process.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second is, do we have any further discussion?
Steve, one thing that I would like to amend this to include is the suspension of all charging privileges for member monthly charges.
Once they've been turned over?
Once they've been turned over. Once we get notification, because you said you don't get notification until after the 90-day period, is that correct?
No. We get notifications before. Sorry, in terms of delinquency, we get notification 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. The question was, is anybody more than a couple of quarters and delinquent? That's the data I cannot give. But up to 90 days, we get the data by individual homeowner.
So
But your suggestion to amend this is something else, right?
my suggestion is that we suspend charging privileges until they're up to date. What timeline we set that, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days. Why wouldn't we, I guess is the question, why would we not include suspension of charging privileges if they're delinquent.
It's a good point. It's worth considering, and as I would say, is if you want, I can amend the second one to say, as part of one of the recommendations from them is to review at what point they can be suspended. It's a good point, Sandy.
Good question, Sandy. Just to follow up on that, one of the residents asked that earlier, Christian. I think your response was, we need to get with the Mankin Law Group and have them review our declarations, and that may or may not be a good suggestion. Once they confirm we can do that on the monthly charges and stay within the declarations, we may decide at that time to do it. And that would not require a board vote, I don't think, if we were to make that change, would it?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So that was really, just need to confirm that we're not stepping outside the declarations when we do that.
Okay, we should run this again? Or from the discussion, is there any changes to the said motion that's on the floor?
I don't see it because it will fall under the recommendations, and we can ask them to review as part of that.
All right, I could accept that. Any other discussion? All right, if there's no discussion, let's vote. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you so much. The next item on our agenda this evening is the Esplanade website enhancement proposal. Krish, is that, or is your group doing that, Sandy? You're taking care of that?
You wanna
Okay.
introduce them? Say- Sandy, you can sit in my chair. Come on.
Oh, wow.
You will feel the weight on your shoulders in about 3 seconds.
Yeah, I'm sure, I'm sure. Just for introduction, I'm Sandy Savin. Oh, yes, thank you. Just for introduction, I'm Sandy Savin, and long-term resident here at Esplanade, and served with Jim on the very first liaison group that we had. And it's amazing that now we've gotten to the point, 7 years later, that some of what we identified is finally getting through. So to me, this is all very exciting. Also, I see that I am sandwiched between all the stuff about the collection policy, thank you, and on the other side, a proposed violation enforcement policy. So what I've got is good news. So I'd just like to tell you that. Based on, this is going to be hard. Here we go.
Paper copy, Sandy. Would you like a paper copy?
I have a paper copy, but I just want to check up on this one for a second, okay? Thank you.
Go ahead, I'll keep track of that.
Okay. I want to stay on this page for a minute, as I indicated. As you see, the name of what we're presenting tonight is the Digital Support Systems Enhancement Update. And the first thing is, people even here on the board said, Digital Support Systems Enhancement Plan? What's that? So I just want to let you know how we came about. Back a little over a year ago, when you had the operations transition team, the infrastructure group was assigned the responsibility for inventorying everything in Esplanade so that we would know what we had, anything you can touch or feel. About a half a year into that, they realized that nobody was looking at what the technology was, because that's not a physical thing, like the body or the bottle or the microphone. So Krish came to us and appointed a group that was designated the Communications and IT Systems Group, and our job was to inventory all of the software products that were being used by Pope and Taylor Morrison at that time. Just what we found out surprised us. There were 19 separate things that were being used, none of which talked to each other, none of which were consolidated anywhere. And we looked at all this and said, seems to us that there's a better way to do this. So the Communications and IT Systems Group started working with Krish and the board to look at how can we come up with a plan to get us where we need to be. And the plan is a 3-phase plan that I will tell you about first. And then our big idea for this group is to look at phase 2, because phase 1 has already been accomplished. And I'll let you know what phase 1 is. So, phase 1 okay. I love technology. By the way, I'm the only person in the group who has no technology background. So and the reason why I'm there is because I need to bring them down to, how can you explain this to someone like me who's sitting out there? So what we've done, and I'll give you some examples as I go along, I'm here to bring it down to plain English. Okay, so phase 1 was the installation of a standalone server here at Esplanade. It's housed in the Culinary Center. And what we had found out as we were preparing this year for the move from Pope to Icon was that we were on a shared server in the Pope headquarters office, and we were sharing it with 2 other Esplanades. So here's our data all mixed up with 2 other Esplanades in a place where we are not. And we looked at that and said, you know, we really need, first jargon, a DPS. DPS is a dedicated physical server, okay? So they wanted to move this standalone, dedicated physical server. Then we needed to purchase the software that would support everything that the board and management wants to do, as well as the website, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. They transferred the database from the shared server at Pope to the one that we now have in the Culinary Center, and installed all the modules required for POS, which is point of sale, such as the golf course, the Culinary Center, and so on, as well as all the things that Krish does with finance. And that was completed in May of this year. So that phase has been done. Krish had an agreement at the time that that was done that they would allow 90 days for things to kind of fall into place and stabilize before we tried to do anything else. So that was installed in the end of May. So we have June, July, and August, which brings us to the point that we can now begin to move into phase 2. So phase 2 is the design and installation of an HOA website. An HOA means everybody. It's the board, you're part of the HOA. It's the groups. It's the end user is the community. It's the management at Icon, so that we can get something consolidated instead of having 19 separate things out there where nothing is talking to anyone and it's really hard to get the data. So we're in the process of designing and installing the website that will meet the needs of the whole community. The website we're currently using is something that was part of Taylor Morrison's marketing website, and it was hosted by One-to-One Marketing. And at the end, they punched in something called members, and we'll talk about that a little later. So this is where we are now, is looking at designing and implementing the website. And as you can see there, there's a target date of the fourth quarter of 2020. And the reasoning on that is that usually something like this takes 2 to 3 months to get done. And they told us initially 3 months to give us the outside range, but they've come back and said that, and I'll tell you who they is in a minute, come back and said that because of COVID, where they had some of their staff that had some COVID issues, they're a little bit behind. So they said it might take until the end of the quarter. That's our outside date, and we're all hopeful we can do it before December 31st. So that's phase 2. Boy, that thing's touchy, isn't it? Okay, then moving on to phase 3, which will come later, is the introduction of appropriate and approved Jonas modules. Jonas is the company that provides all of the support and management of what we have right now. And they've got some modules that are different from what we're currently using. We're currently using things like Chelsea, Salix, Open Table. In phase 2, we'll have a design that we hope everyone will love, and it will include, for the interim, the Chelsea, Salix, MindBody, et cetera modules. When we get to phase 3, we would like to look at shifting into Jonas modules that do the same thing, and in addition, they will tie everything into what we already have in phase 1, so that the board and management and all the groups will be able to look at things and consolidate them a whole lot easier. And it will give us that better integration that we're looking for instead of a scattershot approach that we have right now. So we're allowing all of 2021 for that because, again, we want to allow at least 90 days for phase 2 to settle in and stabilize. And while that's happening, we're going to be interviewing icon management. We're going to be interviewing the board to look at what is it that you think is essential to have in this website that we can build in it. Then we're going to go to the groups, the various liaison groups, and find out from their perspective, looking at the end user, what is it that they would like to see in there. So what we have a working document of things that we think might be good in there. We'll present that to all of the people that we'll talk with and say, what do you like about this? What do you think it's missing? What is it you'd like to see us do differently? So it's going to be a very iterative process where everyone will have a say so that it ends up meeting, as it says there, the needs of the entire community. And that will be phase 3, and that will eventually bring us to better integration. Okay? Ooh, look at that sky. That's beautiful. So we get to what our desired results are today. And what we wanted to accomplish today was review where we are now in the 3-phased digital support systems enhancement plan. We've got to find a little short thing for that. And how phase 2, which we're moving into right now, aligns with the overall plan that has 3 phases. And we would like to get agreement on the timing and objectives. So we're going to look at the timeline and the goals and make sure you're all agreeing with that. We'd like to obtain agreement on the criteria and requirements for phase 2. And that's basically technical requirements and user-based requirements. And then finally, with all that cushion that we've heard about, we'd like to get financial approval to proceed with phase 2. So that's what we're looking to do with this presentation. So the question comes up, why do we need to design a new website? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the current website, One-to-One Marketing, was Taylor Morrison's way of marketing the community. It was never intended to be an HOA site. So we really don't have a real HOA site. The TM edition of the member portion, that last button at the bottom, is very haphazard. When they started putting stuff in there, they just dumped it in. Couldn't find anything in there. It just was very difficult for any user, including management, you've talked about it, to navigate. You, in some cases, have to have multiple sign-ins. You don't just log on. Then you get to another part and they want you to sign in again. And it's very difficult to find information and locate documents. So everybody's complained about it, from management all the way down to the end users. And the best thing, and you'll hear more about that from the strategic planning group, is that it's been identified as a priority issue in the survey that they put out. So everyone wants it, basically. So that's why we need to do it. So the question is, what is the value proposition of having a newly designed website? What will we gain from it? Well, we're going to gain an improved UX, is what the people talk about. And UX is user experience. So how are we going to do that? It's going to be set up so that it is consistent and intuitive. You don't have to figure out in every section, now how do I find this, how do I find that? Everything's going to be organized in each section in the same way. So you know, if you're looking for who are the people who I contact in, say, golf, that's the second part of the golf section, and it will be the second part of the tennis section. Second part of each section, people say, oh, if I need to find that out, I know where to go to get it. And along with the ease of navigation, there's going to be ease in registering for events, for quickly finding relevant information, such as who to contact for what, and finding forms, such as the forms that the ARC uses for approval, and HOA documents. It's all going to be housed in there. Then the added value to all that is that we see it as a way to build unified community spirit that, you know, people will look forward to getting into it. They'll look forward to seeing what's happening in other areas of the community. So we're looking that it can unify the community spirit and promote homeowner involvement. We're going to set it up so it's very interactive so that the homeowners can get involved. We also see it as a great opportunity to brand Esplanade. We don't believe that we don't showcase our community enough. We don't showcase the fact that we've got world-class amenities. We've got a variety of programs. We've got all these lifestyle and recreational opportunities. And we want to look at a way to set Esplanade apart from its competitors. So that's what we see this doing. And by the way, there'll be both an internal HOA component. We're also going to design an outside-facing component so that the public can look at golf and see how great our golf is. They can look at the culinary center in terms of the catering that they're going to be doing. So if I am getting set to host my daughter's wedding, this is one of the places I'll go to look to see what kinds of things are here. So we have both. And in some ways there'll be similarities, but we'll show the community out there how great we are and how we are differentiated from our competitors. We also are going to use it to highlight HOA special projects. And by that I mean all of the things that we do in this community, and we do a lot in the way of service and contribution to the local community. We've got, for example, Crafts for Causes, and all of that is geared toward helping the outside community. We do a lot of work with the All Faiths Food Bank, donating food, and we want to be able to highlight that and give people an opportunity to join up and do that. And another thing we do is the angel tree at Christmas, where we have a Christmas tree out here in the lobby with little cards on it of different people who are needy. And, you know, a kid named Joe, who's 12 years old, puts down what he wants, and somebody within the community chooses Joe's card and goes out and is the secret angel or the secret Santa for Joe. So we do a lot of things, and we want to highlight those because they're very important and give more people an opportunity to contribute and join. So with all that, what do we need from you tonight? First of all, we need the money to do it. And it's going to have to, if we do it on the timeline we're proposing, it's going to have to come out of the 2020 budget. And what we see is that it will cost no more than $5,000 to design and install it, because we already have other contracts with Jonas, so we can build in on those contracts. And at the outside, and that's pretty much an outside cost, we're looking at $5,000 coming from the budget. So what we need is your approval, and then the signed contract with Jonas as soon as possible so that we can get started very early in September. So that's what we're here asking for tonight. And I think that the residents are going to love it, management will love it, board will love it. I'm excited about it. So that's it. You're welcome. Yeah, I bet I do.
There's a few, I was just jotting them down here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So these first two questions are similar in nature. The main concept being, will the condominium communities have a section of the website that they might be able to access that would be specific to issues for their communities?
If that's something they want, sure, we can definitely consider that.
Okay. The other question was similar in nature. It said, will the condo communities get to use new server and enhanced websites and software? I think that's kind of along those same lines.
Ask that again.
Will the condo communities get to use new server and enhanced websites and software?
Oh, sure, yeah. They're part of Esplanade. You know, I know
Right.
they're separate in some ways, but they're part of our overall community, yes, absolutely.
And then the other question was, will the community feedback system be there?
Yes, it will.
I presume a link as it is now,
Yes.
because it does link to a separate third party.
Yes.
And will still probably require a separate login for that? Or do we know that yet?
I don't know for sure, not necessarily, but yes, that will be there. There's going to be two components so that the outside world is not going to see something like the feedback system or things that we do internally. The outside component for the public is basically a marketing component where we market Esplanade.
Would for my own benefit, wondering if the governing documents would be on the outside page where it maybe doesn't require a login, that would be helpful to a lot of realtors during resales and accessing all of the governing documents and amendments and things
It's
that
a
they
great
need.
idea we hadn't thought of. This is why we want it to be iterative. We've thought of a lot of things, but you're coming up with great additions. So, yeah,
Sure.
if that's helpful to realtors, sure.
Yeah, I think it would help streamline that resale
Yeah.
process, because that can be frustrating sometimes for the
Yes.
homeowners. You have so many documents here. Let's see. So will this be completed by the end of 2020?
That's our goal. That's what we're asking for.
Okay. And gosh, It looks like excellent presentation, Sandy. Yes, good job, Sandy. Kudos to Sandy and the IT group. Very clear presentation. Kudos to that group. So I guess you're on the right track here.
Yeah, well, thanks to everybody. And I also would like to thank the group. There are 5 other people on the group, all with technology background. Well, Susan is kind of a hybrid. She's got some technology, and she also is in the communications field. Susan Gilpatrick is back at the table over there. Our other members are John Downs, Bob Fischler, John Fitzgerald, and Tom Taylor. And they've all got extensive IT experience. And this team I love. They work together so well. It's been a total pleasure working with them, and I want to thank them publicly. So, okay. Okay.
Can I make one comment? The request came from condominium associations. I think they will talk to them, but just a note of caution, if each condo association out of the 6 wants their own thing and all 6 condos are going to be different,
Yeah,
and it'll
no, I
create,
think we see them.
will just create a lot of issues. So
Yeah.
as long as all 6 of them agree to a certain process, certain things that can get incorporated very easily.
Right.
Okay, good to know.
But we'll make sure they're included in this thing as the
Okay.
conversation.
And give them the options and
give them the
to talk through
Absolutely.
those. Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank
Very
you.
helpful.
And thank you for your chair. It was a pleasure being head of the board for my moment of fame.
Some days better than others, Sandy. Thank you very much. And it just indicates the amount of experience and the amount of passion people have for this community to volunteer. It's a lot of hours. I mean, I'm not an IT person. I just can't wait to have a different website, or no, have a website, because this isn't really one of them. And what we're going to do is change things up right now. I think it's we got a lot of other important items as well, but also the survey that our strategic planning group has done is of immense importance to the community. I know everybody is waiting to hear what those results are. So the members come up front, please. Oh well, okay. Getting back to the IT proposal. $5,000 is a limit that doesn't need a board approval. It needs approval from the board liaison person. That's Krish, and I'm sure he's going to. I'm not going to speak for him, but I'm sure it's going to happen. So I would say with that, you have the approval. Thank you. So with that, waiting a long time. I will move again. Cindy, are you going to sit here? I'm coming up. Okay.
Are we all set? Well, thanks everyone that is still hanging in there. We have a long meeting tonight, as you've noticed. A lot of good stuff, a lot of really important stuff. But some also really important results that we wanted to get out to the entire community. And just to give you a little bit of background on how this all started, when the board took over, we had a number of priorities, as all of you are aware, the most important one being the turnover from the developer to the HOA. And at that time, we realized that we didn't have a strategic plan. Taylor Morrison had strategic plans, which were basically based on selling houses and generating revenue for the corporation. So we realized that this was a need, but just didn't have the time to get to it right away. So I recommended, and fortunately my colleagues on the board agreed, that we should implement an ad hoc strategic planning group that could start to progress some of this work in building the strategic plan for our community. So we assembled the group, and as we first started meeting, we discussed the need to have the voice of the community. If we're going to build a plan that's for the community, we should hear from the community. We hear from some residents in the community on a regular basis, but we wanted broader input from more members of the community. So that's when we decided to launch the Strategic Planning Group Survey. So I want to start before the group gets into it. I just want to recognize this group because they have done a tremendous job in developing the survey, in going through all of the comments, the findings, presenting to the board members, presenting to ICON, presenting to the various managers, assisting with helping us determine what the priorities will be for the 2021 budget planning. So they've been involved in a lot of time behind the scenes as well, sitting in with some of the homeowner liaison groups. So I want to give a big shout out. I have two of the members here with me, Cindy Wenban, who is now sitting in Steve Salamini's chair. Cindy is the chair of the group. And we also have Pravat Mazumdar, who is also going to be presenting as well. The other members of the group who also contributed greatly to this work is Tim Carnahan, Jim Payton, Maggie Randolph, and as the finance liaison, Frank Harris. So put your hands together at home and give this group a round of applause for the great work that they've done, and you'll see it here in just a few minutes. So next slide. Okay, so what we wanted to do tonight is kind of cover the results, give you some of the top line messages that came out of the survey, go through a little bit on the process, participation, some of the demographic information that was found in the survey, as well as the importance ranking and frequency of use findings. We'll also go through some of the amenities, service satisfaction and findings, key management messages and issues, and then what are we going to do next? So what are the next steps and actions that we're going to take, as well as the next steps and actions that ICON will take. And we'll also open it up for some Q&A time at the end. So just to give you an idea of some of the headline messages. First we had, next slide. Krish? Yeah, headline messages. We had a very high participation rate, and according to ICON, it's one of the highest rates of participation that they have seen, and Cindy's going to provide more details, but incredible interest and enthusiasm from the community to take the time to participate, and not just to check boxes and answer some questions, but to provide some really solid, candid input that is very helpful for us going forward. Very important is that overall satisfaction with the community is really high. There are some individual amenities that ranked a little bit lower in terms of satisfaction, but overall ranking within the community is very high. What came back as number one in terms of importance as well as dissatisfaction is home landscaping and maintenance. And I think a lot of members of the community guessed that that was going to come back as the number one issue in terms of importance and dissatisfaction. From food and beverage, what came back is that the Bahama Bar and the Culinary Center should complement each other. They each have sort of their own individual identities that they should, instead of compete with each other, they should complement each other. And then looking at the community infrastructure improvements that are needed, there are improvements needed in terms of access, safety, security, and lighting. And then from a golf perspective, some of the golf issues that came up is that the issues are very complex and in some ways, a lot of ways, are very divisive in the community. And there were very many conflicting recommendations when it came to golf. Next slide, please, Krish. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Cindy. She's going to walk through more on the process and the details.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, for the survey process, we used SurveyMonkey online, and we began our confidential survey on July 13th, and we gave every resident 10 days to complete it. The goal was to help the board to understand the voice of the residents, as Sandy said, and the priorities for our community for our 2021 strategic planning and budget. and we had over 1,200 or 1,218 out of about 2,400 active members have responded. In fact, that gave us a 70% response rate, and almost half of those that responded in the first full day of the survey. So that shows the enthusiasm the residents had to share their comments. We also had over 400 residents that volunteered their contact information. Now, we did keep all of the contact information and names separate from our analysis, and it's completely confidential, meaning the names are not associated with any of your inputs. And we do appreciate everyone's valuable time and efforts because we received over 13,000 comments. And many of those comments are just golden nuggets of opportunity. Residents took a lot of time to put well thought out, well organized information and ideas forward. And I'm very impressed with those ideas because they can be taken to the next step. And ICON is also the department managers are looking at the comments and looking for opportunities. And finally, based on statistics, we have high confidence that our survey results are representative of the entire population. Next slide. Now, we've collected demographics in 9 separate areas so that we could sort the data, and we wanted to look for different ways to sort it to answer different kinds of questions. What we're reviewing with you today is the entire population of responders, but we can sort the data and look at different ways of deeper dives into the data. On this slide, we have 77% full-time residents, and 80% are between the ages of 55 and 75, and about 2/3 are golf members, 1/4 club members, and 11% are original resident members. Next slide. A few more ways to slice the data and demographics. We have 17% work full-time, and over half have been here 3 years or less. Next slide. And the final on demographics, we even looked at what street did you live on so that we could better pinpoint issues that would be geographical kinds of issues, like where there might be landscaping issues, drainage, roads, things of that type. Next slide. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? We're going to dive into this next phase of looking at the results. But before I do that, I just want you to flash back to you're actually taking the survey. So if you remember, we started out with some fairly easy questions, and then we got to this fairly difficult question about ranking 18 different items in a table. They were listed in a random order, so when a particular resident saw that question, it was not always in the same order. It was randomized to remove any bias. And we suggested a way to actually make that task easier. We said use a drag and drop process where you could actually move the important items to the top, the less important items to the bottom, and then so the middle ones would automatically sort of fall out. And then do a little fine-tuning of, what's number 1 through 6, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit of a challenging task, so we'll start with that. What we've got on this slide is the reporting of those results. So basically, across the top, you'll see 1 through 18. Those are the ranking of number 1, number through to number 18. And that what we've organized here is the various amenities, and we asked you to rank 18 different items. And the individual score. So if you look at the top cell, the very first item in the number 1 rank, so individual landscaping, as Andy mentioned, was a very high ranking. So it came up with a 26% of people said, that's my number 1 priority. If you drop down to the section on golf course, you'll see the relevant number there. The first item is 28%. Right? So one could argue, well, 28% is higher than 26, so that's actually the most important item for the community. As we looked at that data, we said, no, there's something else going on. If you look at the top several ranks, 1 through 6, or 1 through even 3, there's a large preference, for example, in the individual landscaping, where a lot more people actually ranked that particular item very high within that top 6. Specifically, 78% of people ranked individual landscaping 1 through 6. That's 860 odd people, versus golf at 58 and 562. So in our judgment, that actually reflects a broader view of importance, and that's the definition that we've used. Overall importance being the way it's scored in the top 6 ranks. So given that background, the numbers on this slide, 1 through 9, rank the items in terms of that overall importance. Now, if you look at it at the top 6 or 7, there's no big surprise there. All of the individual landscaping touches pretty much everybody in the community, unless you're in the condos, and even there's an element of that. The 2 dining centers, the community infrastructure, and the golf course, okay? So those are the top ranked items, and then several in the middle. So the next slide will summarize that for you and show you the top 6, the middle 6, and the bottom 6, and how they ranked for all 18 items. So the message here really is the top 6, obviously, we'll focus a lot of attention on, but every item is going to get attention, as you'll hear later on in the presentation. An important dimension about the bottom 6 is that there are large numbers of people, still in the single digit and so forth, that ranked, for example, tennis or pickleball or spa as their number or as their high priority item. So there's a very small concentrated group of people for whom that is very important. So you've got to keep that in mind as well. Okay, moving on to the next slide, where we asked about frequency of use. Frequency of use was, we debated this as a team. We decided the way to ask the question was in the context of anticipated use in 2021. And the reason for that is we knew this was going to be used for the budget process going into 2021. And secondly, the history for the last several months with the COVID experience was basically difficult to define. Were you responding to the first few months or the more recent COVID experience? So we asked it in the context of 2021. Again, the scale here is from never to various degrees of usage, all the way up to very frequent usage, weekly or greater. And we've ranked the 18 items by order of importance to show you what that result looks like. So several things, again, a lot of data, but we'll call out a few things. The high usage items, Culinary Center, Bahama Bar, Golf Course, received very high usage rankings in the monthly or greater. There were several items that were much less used, and they sort of reflect the order of importance. For example, the tennis, spa, Messina pool, etc. So, and we'll get into that as we go into the individual items. One additional thing I want to point out on the golf course, because it comes up, it came up earlier today. There's going to be a whole discussion coming up from the board later. Golf is an interesting sort of a barbell effect of usage. There's 32% of people that never use the golf course. And by the same token, there's 32% that use it very frequently. And so there's a dichotomy of sort of usage on golf course. Important perspective to keep in mind. Okay, moving on to the next slide. We touched on this earlier, Sandy did, and Cindy did. So the feedback from residents, this was a very important part of the survey, in addition to the raw scoring of satisfaction and so forth. The ability to provide the group here, the board and the management company, with your comments. 13,000 comments. What we've arrayed here is the number of comments by question and just rank them from top to bottom. Now, I take away a couple of things from this. First off is we touched on it quickly, I think Cindy did. There were 1,218 responses. So if you look at the first one, improve and enhance, there were 846 comments. So that's 2/3 of the people actually made some constructive comment about that particular question. The next one, 700 or so, very high level of engagement and feedback. So it's a very strong message about how actively people were responding to the survey. And another dimension is just, if you look at the top 3 board recommendations and the brand words which came at the very end of the questionnaire, those also got very high scores. And so it's just a testament to how people were engaged throughout the entire survey process. We did, as a group in the SPG, read every comment and synthesize it, and we'll talk later on in how that's going to be used in the future. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a quick summary of the comments in the frequency of use question or following the frequency of use question. We're going to dive into a lot more detail on this, but this was an early indication of the kinds of feedback in terms of why somebody was either using something frequently, an amenity or service, or not using it frequently. So it's an early indication of the kinds of feedback that we're getting. On the positive side, there was people have their own pools, the gym memberships. COVID was a big reason for explaining why they weren't using something. And on the improvement side, and you'll see this several times during the presentation, the various categories of amenities and some feedback along those lines. No surprises here. You'll see many of those as we go forward. Okay, next slide, and the next 2 slides actually, these questions came at the end of the survey, but we've moved them forward here to give you some framework or a reference point as to how you should look at the individual amenity ratings as we go forward in this presentation. So this question said, how satisfied are you with the overall amenities and services at Esplanade? Very strong response, 72% strongly agreed or agreed, so a very strong response. Some level of disagreement and some neither. And the comments, again, very strong positives, community lifestyle, lots of amenities available, friendly and professional staff. And by the way, there are several references already throughout the comments. Keep in mind this was done in the first 2 weeks of July. ICON had been in place for 6 weeks or so. Lots of great comments already of the observations about how ICON was improving things. So that's a very positive sort of feedback. And the improvement comments, again, we'll get into those in detail, but many of the similar thoughts coming up. But keep that 72% in mind, and I'll make a point on the next slide about that as well. So the next slide, when we refer to this as sort of the money question, and the reason for this is most businesses, when they're trying to gauge customer satisfaction and customer loyalty, will ask this single question: how likely are you to recommend our product or service to a friend or relative? It's the single biggest predictor of customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. We used it in the context of resident satisfaction because it's such an important dimension. The numbers are very strong. 81% agree that they would recommend Esplanade to a friend or relative. Now, the psychology behind this is really key. You have to do 2 things to get that sort of high score. One is you have to validate your own decision that you made the decision to live here, in effect. And the second part of that is that you're actually recommending it to a friend or relative, so you're putting yourself and your reputation on the line. So given that context, an 80% score is very strong. And you can see some of the comments around that. Amazing place to live, great community, nice kudos to the board. But there are some things for improvement, and we'll definitely talk about that. Once you just keep those two reference points, 72%, 80%, as Cindy talks about the individual amenities. Thanks.
Okay, individual home landscaping. So this is our satisfaction slide, and I'll describe how to read it. We use the same format for all 18 amenities. And as you heard earlier, this amenity is ranked number 1 in importance and number 1 in dissatisfaction. So we read this table from left to right, and it's from very dissatisfied to very satisfied. In our research on how to design, develop, and analyze surveys, we learned a few things. First of all, whenever you have a dissatisfied response that's greater than 15% or higher, we circled that item to highlight the priority so that we could look for potential actions. We did that on each slide. In addition, if it's over 15%, we also looked at that middle section, neither satisfied or dissatisfied. What we learned is that we must pay attention to that because what that says is that the people who could not decide that they were satisfied or dissatisfied, they were not happy enough to be satisfied, and we considered that to be more on the negative side. So we circled that. Those three numbers on that table adds to 68%. You can see the number below that. And in looking at that, the way we describe the slide, it's 68% of the residents could not say they were satisfied, and that's the blue circle table, and that represents 750 residents. You get that number by looking at that far left column, or right column, and it's the sample size, and that's the number of respondents to the survey. Now, we had 1,218 people that responded to the survey, but they could skip questions. Frequency of use was one question they could not skip. That was a forced answer, but every other question could be skipped. So we had a fairly high amount of people interested in responding to this question at 1,101. So that's how we got the 750 respondents that could not say they were satisfied. We had 681 comments. So out of the 1,100 people, 681 made comments. And so that leads us to how did we evaluate and take all of the 681 comments and get it down to a smaller group and a consolidated group. And what we did is we were very fortunate to have a team of people that had different backgrounds and membership types that analyzed the data and the comments. And what we did with those 13,000 comments is we wanted to ensure that we consolidated them in a meaningful way and that we were taking verbatim comments and selected the phrases that most represented the sentiments of the community. We did this through some healthy debates and reminding each other that we are representing all members equally and leaving our own opinions on the table or out of the analysis. So most of the comments on this slide you'll see are about lawn maintenance, shrubs, and expectation of maintenance-free landscape care. And since that care is not meeting expectations, many of the residents are hiring outside services or performing the work themselves, thus that high dissatisfaction level. On the positive side, many noted that icon management improvement is underway, and 32% did say they were satisfied. Okay. Next slide, community infrastructure. This was rated number 3 in importance and has several sub-elements of concerns. Between 25 and 62% of the residents could not say they were satisfied. That represents between 300 and 700 people. These are the kinds of areas that are we see on an everyday basis. Main concerns were about safety and security related. Lighting was recommended as a number of times, preventing tripping hazards, things of that type. But mostly the comments were about lighting, guards, gates, roads, drainage, weeds, algae in the pond. And on the positive side, icons making improvements. Some people did say roads and gates were functional and that was good enough for them. Satisfaction, the satisfied side is 37 to 65% of those noted that icon is improving and they're satisfied. Next slide is the Bahama Bar. Did I? I did. Thank you. Okay, Culinary Center. It's ranked number 2 in importance with almost 1,100 responders. Between 36 and 53%, or 400 to 600 people, could not say that they were satisfied. Most improvement comments were on the acoustics, ambiance, hours, prices, and service. We did have some high satisfaction ratings on some of those elements, and you can see that this slide has the various elements. We call those subcategories. I'll get to that in a moment. But in some of those subcategories, we had 47 to 90% said that they were satisfied, and they had high optimism for ICON's improvement. And certainly the return to happy hour is a very, very high on the list, and keeps people happy, right? On this slide, there's the several sub-elements I talked about. But what I wanted you to know is that all sub-level elements for all questions, whether or not we circled them or highlighted them, they've been captured for prioritization and potential improvement actions. So no worries if you have a high concern about a certain sub-element. It doesn't matter if they've been circled or highlighted. Everything's been captured for actions. Now, earlier, Chris referenced a grid where we have our team has helped with the budget planning. And that's where we took all of the sub-elements, as you're seeing here on this slide, and all the other amenities that have sub-elements. And we plotted those survey sub-elements with both the satisfaction level and importance rankings. And that was helping with prioritizing so that we could make better decisions. When you can see where everything stands in relation to each other, it's easy to understand where to focus your energies and time in a prioritized way. Okay, we talked about infrastructure. Now we're on Bahama Bar. Thanks for keeping me straight here. All right. Bahama Bar is ranked number 4 in importance, with between 35 and 56% who could not say that they were satisfied. Translates to 400 to 600 responders. However, many believe that the Bahama Bar is the primary reason why they bought in this community. They wanted to share with their friends and family. They're very proud when they walk through the tropical pool area into the Bahama Bar. And when they first moved here, many said that it looked fresh and interesting, and they were proud of it. It's looking a little bit tired and worn at this time, and so there are many comments about updates and refreshing it. Other comments were on menu, hours, service, all need improvements. Even though we had 42 to 82% did say that they were satisfied. Okay, next slide is golf. Golf is ranked number 5 in importance. And with 38 to 46% who could not say that they were satisfied, represents between 300 and 350 responders. When you look at the sample size in that far right-hand column, this is a smaller subset of people that responded to this. This is about 730 people responded. That's about 2/3 of the total responders in our survey, indicating that there's fewer people interested in answering this question. However, it's interesting to note that 2/3 responders is approximately the same ratio as golf members to other members in our full community. Comments for improvements were on course conditions. Staff training needs improving. They also thought putting locks in the restroom was a great idea to help with cleanliness. And you'll hear this theme throughout this presentation, but many members are unhappy with how golf usage fees and revenues are supporting the HOA. Also, the reservation system is complicated and difficult to use. Next slide. This is satisfaction with guidelines, rules, and policies. We had 318 comments. 64% of the respondents agreed that the policies are satisfactory. 15% said they were not satisfied. There is some opportunity to be more consistent in its enforcement and allowing residents to comment before changes are made. Some said that the rules are good, some said they're too strict. Next slide. Okay. The survey findings that are going to be posted on the website. But what I wanted you to know is that I mentioned earlier that we have individual slides for each of the questions and the amenities. We just briefed several of them. The remainder of these are going to be listed that are listed on the slide are briefed in summary form in this presentation tonight. However, the full detail for individual slides will be included and posted on the community website. And we showed you how to read the slides and interpret the data. We made sure those slides are very standalone with all the details needed for understanding and reading that slide. Okay. Next slide.
Okay, these were some of the comments to the question that was asked around if you could make three recommendations to the board, what would they be? And so there were many comments around golf issues. Cindy touched on many of these: fees, conditions, the public-private debate, membership, the financial impact on the community, tee times, and drainage to homes from the golf course. Landscaping issues, individual residences, common area, individual problem resolution. Culinary center issues, menu, service, pricing, specials, extended hours, ambiance, acoustics, synergies with the Bahama Bar, and financial impact overall on the community. Bahama Bar issues, menu, service, pricing, extended hours, quality drink offerings, clean up and update the Bahama Bar, and the financial impact on the community. In terms of community issues, safety, lighting, rules enforcement, property value awareness, security, and communication. And HOA fees was one of the things that were included in the comments, although this was not a question that was asked elsewhere in the survey. But when it came to things that the community would like for the board to focus on, maintaining reasonable HOA fees came up often. Next slide, Krish. What we've learned, and some of this is redundant. Cindy covered it in a lot of the slides that she went through, and it's also each individual amenity will be available in the slide deck that will be available through the website. Landscaping opportunities, the various things of the Culinary Center and Bahama Bar changes, infrastructure. Next slide, Krish. Golf, again, some of the things that have already been touched on. HOA fees, review and communicate revenue expense impacts for fees for golf, food and beverage, HOA, and reserves. And then other activities that were recommended: review the lifestyle offerings and improve regular events and ensure space for all, which hopefully post-COVID we can get back to some of those things. Review fitness program offerings, fees, and address crowded conditions. Improve the upkeep of the pool areas, umbrellas, cushions, and towel service. Review additional courts and peripherals for tennis and pickleball. The gyms need to be reviewed in terms of equipment, space, access, and cleanliness, and address spa pricing, services, use, and booking and staffing. Next slide, Krish. So in terms of next steps and some of the actions that have already been taken, the board has already gone through this with the strategic planning group. So based on the feedback, what we found going through this is that many of the findings align with the developer deficiencies that we spoke about at our last board meeting, which are now called alleged construction defects. There was great alignment in many of those things. And so through the Taylor Morrison settlement, we will be able to address several high priority issues. The roads, as Dick touched on in his presentation at the last meeting, will be completed over the next 3 months. The acoustics remediation in the Culinary Center, the drainage impacting homeowners' property and bunkers, and some of that has already been addressed, and we'll continue to address those based on the priority and the greatest needs. Insufficient lighting, specifically around the mailboxes, the Benito Gate, the Amenities Center, and the pickleball courts, and the Amenities Center flooring and windows. The board will also be taking the lead on major policy topics, governance, and communications, and in some cases, which I thought was a great recommendation by the strategic planning group, we will assign task force groups to address the issues more comprehensively where we feel like we need some additional support to accomplish that. And our hope is to include key stakeholders that have balanced resident representation across the community. As Krish mentioned earlier, he is planning some community meetings, which during those meetings, which will not be board meetings, they will be educational meetings focusing on revenue expenses and financial impacts in the fall. So stay tuned for those dates. We'll be communicating those shortly. Next slide, Krish. In terms of ICON will be addressing operational issues, and all of the ICON managers have been briefed on the survey results, as well as all of the managers have been given the comments of their respective departments. And they will be digging in to gain a deeper understanding of the issues around the comments that were provided. And all of the elements of the survey are captured into detailed action plans for the ICON managers. Some of the solutions that are underway, and we just listed a few here because ICON is going to be giving a presentation later on in mid to late September where they'll update the community on many more of these actions. But just some of the examples are listed here. Training of the guards, extending the Bahama Bar hours. As many of you have seen and commented, our golf course superintendent has developed a plan to improve and enhance the course conditions, and we're already seeing great results in the short period of time that he's been on board. From a golf operations perspective, they're currently, Aaron and his team are evaluating the current tee times operations management software to make sure that we have the right software to most efficiently and effectively manage the golf course operations. So a lot of good things already well underway and more to come, again, as I mentioned, when ICON gives their update to the community later on in September.
Okay. So that concludes our presentation, and we'll take questions.
Well, the first comment on the feed is Cindy and Previtt. Great presentation. So
Thank
good
you.
way to start. We still have quite a few viewers, so if anybody has questions, now is certainly the time to put those into the system. Another comment of great information. Appreciate all the work. And our feed is, of course, runs about 20 to 25 second lag, so we might want to just give people a
Okay.
second to
Good.
publish their questions if they have them.
So we're sharing this slide about taking questions if later on, but we'll take them face to face right now.
We do have a question of when will there be follow-up surveys?
So our thinking is whenever it's needed. I mean, we've got a plethora of information, and we're still analyzing that information, of course, but if we find that there's some kind of a need for a short pulse survey or some short information where ICON says they'd like to make a decision to do this or that and have a couple decision points, we can go out with a quick survey and get that information. But the plan was initially that we would do this once a year and update it so we can compare year to year and look for improvements.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's a good timeline to kind of check back in and see our progress compared to, this is sort of the baseline of the results, so what's working well, what's not working so well. So if we do it again in a year from now, it'll be interesting to see where have we made improvements and where are we still falling short. So I think it's good directional information to help guide the decisions and actions of the board and ICON.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Sure. Pravat would like to add a thought.
Yeah, the thought is really that it ties to what Krish talked about, in terms of major capital improvements and so forth. The idea is once that is crystallized into some kind of a proposal or options for addressing a particular capital need, the survey is a great vehicle to actually define that and then go out to the community and say, what do you think about that? Here are the cost implications, so on and so forth. So it's a very decision-making tool as well as a checking kind of tool as Cindy and Sandy have just described.
Lots of comments coming in of kudos and thanks. Thanks for such a wonderful presentation. That could not have been easy dissecting all those surveys. We've got another one that says, thank you for a great presentation. Proud to be part of this community. Will the strategic group refer any specific issues to other groups, i.e. the golf group or IT group or so on?
Absolutely. We also, with all of the data that we have the ability to do the deeper dives and analyze the data in different ways. So as the groups look at this information and understand it. And of course, ICON department managers, they're the ones with the power and authority to really make the changes, and of course the board. But we want to have an opportunity to support and help and give them the information they need. Absolutely.
Great.
I think we have one more slide, Cindy, on the,
Oh, yes. So if there's any questions that you have that you didn't bring up today, we put a on the community experience feedback system. All you need to do is enter that feedback system, and you go just below the tutorial that pops up. When you say click here, it pops up a little menu, and you can select strategic planning, and that would direct your question directly to our group so that we can get a timely response to you.
Okay, so I want to thank, again, Cindy, Pravat, Jim, Tim, Maggie, and Frank for all of their efforts. If you see them in the community, please take the time to thank them. They have put in a lot of hours on behalf of the community. So thanks again for all your hard work. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you who stayed tuned in.
There was one other quick question. When any idea when the specific issues may be distributed to the groups? Any sort of timeline on that?
I'm not sure which specific issues, but
Well, just some of the areas that maybe need work.
we're going to put the rest of the slides. The slides will be put on the community website tomorrow.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, great.
All
Okay. Wonderful.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pravat. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pravat and Cindy. It's an amazing amount of work, and for one, I would say that it's a great baseline for the community. It's a testament to how many people really care about this community, which is almost everyone, and I would say everyone. And it'll be a good roadmap for not only the board but for ICON, because a lot of these things are addressed and will be addressed by our wonderful, iconic service managers. And one thing I would like to say, and I will admit it, that this has been so important. I wish I put it in. I'm in charge of the agenda. I should have made it first because it's that important. And we will have this on the community website, or the non-website, as Sandy would say. But the website we have now, and there'll be a lot more to this. But we have to march on our agenda, which is very long tonight. And I'll turn this back over to Tess. Where are we?
Okay, so we're just going to jump back up. You know, as we've been talking over the last several weeks since ICON has come on board, a lot about compliance and how best to kind of lunge into the backlog that was left and some of the things that maybe have been lingering, as well as some of the new things that are popping up. Obviously, we always have new homeowners moving in and learning the ropes of what it's like to live here. So, you know, as we prepare to do that, our software is in place. Our templates will be finalized in the next day or two. Formal letters are going to need to start going out. But before we do that, obviously, you know, from a management perspective, I want to make sure that management and the board are on the same page in terms of what we're going to do in terms of notifying people of their compliance matters and make sure that we're consistent in our enforcement process. I can't speak to how it was done previously or whether or not there was a process in place with the prior management company, but I think now's a good time. So what I'm proposing is a 3-letter system, essentially. A first notice that would give 10 calendar days to resolve the matter. If it were not resolved within those 10 calendar days, a second notice would give an additional 7 days, and then one final notice prior to being referred to the board for consideration of a fine. They would get 5 more days. So you'd essentially have, 3-week period to resolve any outstanding compliance issue before it's referred to the board for consideration of a fine. As statute is stated, the board has the responsibility to review those violations and put those fines in place and vote whether or not to go that route. And then once you do, the homeowner with the compliance matter then has, 14 days, calendar days after, the date of that letter to then appeal that if they so wish. So, that's bringing you to about 5 weeks, 6 weeks in total. We can certainly shorten this period up and eliminate a letter. There's really nothing in statute that dictates how many letters you have to send or the frequency between the letters. The real only statutory requirement that you have is to allow 14 days for a hearing before the fine is attached to the homeowner's account. So I guess I'm just looking for the board on whether or not this seems like a policy that you could work with, or if we need to tighten it up, and what your thoughts would be. Yes, the association.
Do you have a list, like a menu of fines for offenses?
Yes, that's something that was already in place when we came to the community. I don't know at what point that was adopted. We'd have to go back into the records to see, but yes, there is. It was a list of different fine amounts that are subject to whatever the type of violation is.
I can add to that. The answer to that is, when I was the chairperson of the compliance, well, it was called the Compliance Committee for Taylor Morrison, we presented a fining structure to them. And that's the one we currently have. And I believe it's being reviewed as we speak now to go over and make sure it's right for all the violations we'd have.
A couple questions here. I guess two. One is, how does this compare to what we have right now? And the second part of that is, when I read this, I'm thinking about maybe somebody having an ornament in their yard that doesn't belong there, like a property kind of thing. Does this also include behavior? Bad behavior in the neighborhood, or is it just property things, or how encompassing is this?
This would be, aside from a collections or assessment type situation, this would apply to any sort of violation of the Declaration of Covenants. So
Just
basically,
the declarations, or does it include the
it would
handbook?
include your community standards, correct? So any violation of the community standards, any violation of the declaration, yes, of course,
So this would include behavior?
it would, yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And how does it compare with what we have now in these regards?
From what I can tell, there is not an established letter policy now that was. I've not been able to find anything.
I'll add to that too. Again, when we had the prior management group, when it came to compliance, shall we just say they did a shoddy job, and they didn't always follow up. And when ICON took over, we had some violations that had single letters and second letters gone out that never made it beyond that, and they were still violations. And ICON right now is doing their best to get it all straightened out and get into the compliance of everything.
Tessa, I just have a couple of comments.
Sure.
Are you expecting a motion and a vote on this tonight?
It doesn't have to be tonight. If you need to think about it, it certainly should be on your next.
I guess the reason I'm asking is, to me, this seems like a piece of a broader program. And I'd really like to see the whole program before I would feel comfortable voting on this. I don't know if this is a one-size-fits-all for all the different types of violations that we may be talking about. And in reference to Jim's comment, there was some kind of a finding schedule put together a long time ago with Taylor Morrison. I would like to have the opportunity to review it all and make sure.
Sure,
that,
sure.
I mean,
We're
I
gonna.
don't feel comfortable voting on anything tonight without seeing the whole program together.
Understood. So I guess from a compliance enforcement perspective, because obviously that is something that we hear a lot about in the community feedback system. It's something that we get emails and photographs emailed to us daily from other residents within your community. we're a couple months in, so we want, our commitment to you was to make sure that we were moving forward with that process. So I just wanted, more than anything, to make sure that we're not lagging, and that certainly when we give people the opportunity to rectify those situations, we're giving them an appropriate amount of time that you're comfortable with. Just trying to make sure we're on the same page as we move forward. So, but I understand this is for consumption. It needs more time, and I don't want to rush it. We can still start our process and at least start with a first letter, and maybe start with a 10 or a 14 day. That'll get us probably to our next meeting.
My question is, from Icon's position and experience, is this standard?
Yes, I would say that 2 to 3 letters is the standard, varying anywhere from a 3-week to 4-week time frame to get it approved, to get it corrected before going to the board for a fine.
Before we vote on it, I kind of agree with Dick. Is this, for the fact that we may not vote on this tonight, does that stop you or hinder your efforts into making compliance issues?
No, I don't think so, because we've been kind of doing that all along. We've been making phone calls, sending emails, just as a courtesy to remind people and just really get people educated and reminding them what the documents do say. We can still start sending letters. I think what I would propose at that point is any first letters that Julia or I send out between now and our next board meeting, that we would give a 14-day window to correct that violation. That'll get us to our next meeting anyways, before we would start sending second violations. And the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of compliance matters to address, so we're not even probably going to get to them all before we meet again, truthfully, because there is a lot going on.
Well, then I propose that we table this issue to the next board meeting to facilitate the information that we need to include the fining schedule. However, for my personal opinion, is that we're probably going to debate days, not the amount of letters. And in the meantime, I personally would not want you to be hindered in any way to make sure compliance is being taken care of. Our prior management and Taylor Morrison, the developer, did things to sell houses and maybe unconsciously suppress some of this, or did not follow through with it on a consistent basis. I know Icon wants to, and your experience tells me that you do this. So we will put this on our next agenda, and for whatever information we need to get to our board members in advance of that, please do so. Okay.
I do want to add one thing. My experience, just to let everybody know, besides the 3 years I did the compliance committee for here, I also worked 2 to 3 years at another community doing basically the same thing. And I will say my estimate is about 90% of any violation that's sent out gets fixed before the second letter goes out.
Good. That's good.
And the other comment that, before we move on, that I would just like to make, just a commitment to those of you who have stuck with us all this time. I see you've gotten a number of questions coming in on this particular process. I'll make sure I record all these questions so that we can be prepared to answer them the next time that we get together to discuss this. Okay?
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay, then our next item of business this evening is the golf bag storage fees.
Who has that one? Oh, it was it was a suggestion to lump both of them and the golf, and the fitness class fees together. So if you want to tag team or how you want to do this.
Yeah, because there's different issues with both. One's more straightforward.
All right, let's start with the golf bag.
Sure. Yeah, so we've had a number of requests from residents due to the COVID situation. We asked that all bags be removed from the bag storage area, and since then, we've given residents the option to now put their bags back in storage. So the recommendation is that we give those members who had paid for their bag storage for the full year, we give them credit for 6 months for 2021's bag storage. So that's the recommendation for the golf bag storage.
Yes, and in the case of the, I think as most residents know, we have a resident wellness program where people pay at the beginning of the year. There's a family program for $430, an individual, I believe it's $280. Well, and that's to be able to take these classes throughout the year. Well, there was 2 months lost, essentially March and April. We didn't have any classes, and we have resurrected them now, but they're at least at this time exclusively outdoor classes and aqua classes. And because of that, I would also recommend that we give 6 months toward 2021 because some of these classes that are offered today, they might not be, some people aren't as receptive to outside classes, so there is an inconvenience with some of our residents based on that. And that's why I think we're being, suggesting being more lenient and just give them 6 months for next year. So,
All
so
right.
I believe we can have one motion for both.
It sounds like someone wants to make a motion for both. No.
I move that we issue a 6-month credit for fitness and golf bag storages towards 2021.
Do I hear a second?
I second it.
Any seconds? Any discussion? Tessa, any discussion, questions online?
Let's see. No. Nope.
If you,
If there are extenuating circumstances for some people, should we have an outlet for them? I have no problem with the 6 months. I'm just saying, if someone came up and for some reason, I don't know, they're moving and they're not going to be in the community in 2021.
I don't think the motion is the way it's set out to address an issue like that.
Okay.
Not to say we couldn't address it in a separate matter, but this is a policy decision by the board. Looks like on an equal basis. I think I need to hear that motion again so it's a little clear. I apologize.
I move that we issue a half-a-year credit for 2021 for all people currently enrolled in fitness and golf bag storage programs.
Got that now. Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion? No discussion, then let's vote. All those in favor, signify aye. Motion passes. Tessa?
All right. I don't think we have anything else out here. Everything is there is violation related. So with that, you can call for adjournment.
I will, well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the community. This was a very long meeting. A lot of progress has been made. It was a fire hose of information on a lot of subjects, but I think with the information we gave you tonight and what will be on the website for you to review, you can see that we're all moving in the right direction, and this is a great place to live, and we really appreciate everybody's participation. So with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Any seconds?
I second.
There's no discussion. Meeting adjourned.